Chapter 481 Ernie Road That Went Astray. Relying on the terrifying power of the Thunder Fruit, even if Anilu hadn't defeated any famous masters yet, he made all the forces in the sea vigilant and put him on the list not to be provoked. The speed of teleportation and the destructive thunder had already been clearly displayed before the eyes of the world with the fermentation of the events of Punk Hazard and Dressrosa. This time, he followed Ulysses to Punk Hazard to perform a mission, and the judgment of the god shattered the entire Punk Hazard and turned it into a ring-shaped island, officially establishing his name, Thor. The matter of becoming famous in the sea made Anilu happy for a long time after returning, and the humiliation felt by Loya and K. Rockdal finally dissipated a little. Anilu understands that it is not that he is too naive, but that the goal is too strong. During this period of time, apart from the necessary training and stability, Anilu was almost all nested in the villa that Loya built for his subordinates, and he felt uncomfortable eating and drinking. I thought this state of excitement would continue for a long time, but Loya didn't expect to meet him here today. He walked over immediately and slapped Anilu on the shoulder, who was chatting with Ratchet. Puff! The slap came so suddenly, Anilu, who was nibbling on the apple, suddenly turned pale. Yuhi spit out the juice and pulp all over the table, laying on it and coughing dryly. This exaggerated reaction made Roha very surprised. Anilu's observation hockey was already very powerful, and with the radio reception of the Thunder Fruit, it stands to reason that he should have been discovered long ago if he didn't hide his whereabouts. But looking at his appearance, he was obviously startled by himself, and a mouthful of apple choked into his trachea. What are you discussing about seeing people? Loya rolled the eyes of the dead fish and glanced at the table curiously. There, dense and complex lines are vaguely visible on a large area of the drawings contaminated by juice. The entire structure is in the shape of a round Jinchuriki column, and the surface is also tattooed with blue cloud patterns representing thunder and sky. This thing Loya is very familiar with, because the thing that Anilu installed on his back looks like this. Teiko. Ahem, yes. Anilu finally got his breath and pointed to the design on the table. I was going to give you a surprise after I was done. Since you have already discovered it, you don't have to hide it. Speaking of this, Anilu slapped the design pattern and said loudly, as long as I have this, I don't have to save lightning every time I fight. Because its capacity will be 10 times that of the drums behind me now. And he suddenly pointed to Ratchet and said confidently, for you, I can't remember. Ah, me, okay. Facing Anilu suddenly pushing himself up, Ratchet was a little dazed at first, and then whispered, also, I made this ring into a ring that can be energy devices that are linked to each other. As long as there is enough current stored in it, Lord Anilu can pass through them and release a lightning strike that does not need to be charged at all. Quote. And if you take it apart separately, although the effect will be reduced, each Teiko is an independent individual. Lord Enel can completely launch moves below 60 million volts against them, and it will not consume too much of his own physical strength. At first, he was a little weak, but as he told the story, a light called confidence gradually flashed on Ratchet's face. As long as this thing is completed, Lord Eneluo's attack strength and continuous fighting ability will be qualitatively improved. By then, defeating Lord K. Rockdar will no longer be a dream, but a very possible fact. That's right, that's it. Anilu applauded from the side, and was about to wave the flag. Fire suppression. Thunderwash. Looking at the pair of live treasures in front of him, Loya was speechless. After a while, he sighed inexplicably, although it was my original purpose to let you get in touch with more technology, but you are completely relying on external forces to improve without the practice. The cart before the horse is upside down. I am letting you learn more about the characteristics of Thunderbolt, not for you to make toys. With a bug-level ability like the Thunder Fruit, you should be more serious about Lao Su. Also, fire suppression. Are you guilty of fear of insufficient firepower? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if he is technology or himself, as long as he can become stronger. Anilu took out a new apple from Kabuto, opened his mouth and took a bite. I'm already very strong, and improving the attack efficiency of the fruit's ability is the direction I should go. That look, that look. Anilu is really a god at this moment, the god of salted fish. Okay, as long as you're happy. Loya decided to take this matter to heart, thinking about how to make Anilu regain his energy and go to practice. With such a powerful power as the thunder fruit, if there is no hope at all, he is still not ready to kill him and search for the thunder fruit again. As a leader, of course, it is impossible to do everything by yourself. In the future, there will be things for them to do. At that time, whether the strength of this group of men can hold up the facade, but the matter is very important. Without continuing to defend, Loya turned to look at Ratchet. By the way, I came today to have something for you to do. Yes, Lord Loya, despite your orders. As a scientific researcher, Ratchet has always been worried about funding and raw materials. His ambition to rule the world with Turtle Island is also for the Master's more resources and technology. But since Loya occupied the island, he provided him with enough funds and manpower, so that his talent was finally fully supported and revealed without any remaining. This made Ratchet respect Loya so much that he almost worshipped the root incense. At this moment, knowing that Loya has a need, he directly put aside the half-finished design drawings, and waited for Loya's orders. This scene fell into the eyes of Anilu, and he was instantly furious. I came first. Clam, I'm the boss. Loya snorted disdainfully, and raised a finger to Anilu, the longest one next to her ring finger. Dissatisfied. Fight. Facing Loya's iron fist, Anilu fled in a fit of rage. Although he didn't come into contact with many powerhouses after arriving in Qinghai, no matter how stupid he was, he wouldn't be so stupid as to confront Luoya. Watching him teleport and retreat, Loya nodded with satisfaction and told Ratchet his request. Hearing that Loya needs a sealed seafloor stone space enough to accommodate people, Ratchet patted his chest confidently. No problem, it's easy. 3 days is enough for me. There are still enough raw materials for Halu stone in the warehouse, and it is not a big problem just to make a box. But one point is very important, because when the experiment starts, K-Rockville must stay with the rustling fruit, so after the construction is completed, when he enters, the external sealing method is very important. Halu stone is extremely hard and extremely difficult to process. After the construction is completed, it will be resealed. I am afraid that Loya will need to do it himself. But it doesn't matter, Loya is also going to take this opportunity to observe the detailed process of this experiment in person. If it is true that success is 100% as Vegapunk said, then an extremely terrifying army is already beckoning to him. What does the army do with it? Does it have to prove itself in battle? No, sometimes, presence or absence is enough to do a lot of things. If the great gift of Vegapunk is really successful, then he must remember this affection. Chapter 482 The experiment begins. Time went by, and soon came 3 days later. Ratchet didn't live up to Loya's expectations. Facing the unusually hard Halu stone, he carved it into a box of sufficient size, millimeter by millimeter. Greeting the undead soldiers, a group of people carried the stone coffin weighing several tons and slowly walked towards the coast. There, Loya and the others were already waiting early. Geisa, are you sure you really understand the experimental data? The object of Loya's questioning was a tall man. The coat on his body fluttered in the wind like gas, revealing a formal dress with diagonal stripes underneath. This person is one of the prisoners Ulysses captured in Punk Hasad. He was a scientist of the scientific core of the Navy headquarters, second only to Dr. Vegapunk's genius. Of course, how big the gap between this, only second, is, it is very worth pondering. Aside from these, as a former colleague of Vegapunk and the second in command of the scientists of the scientific force, Geisa's own level can be affirmed. However, this person wanted to surpass Vegapunk, and even slandered and ridiculed his works, which made it difficult for Loya to give him the experiment with confidence. What Loya is doing now is another meaningful beating. After all, he once said that Guy fate is linked to this experiment, and if he fails, he will die. Don't worry, Lord Loya, even if I don't like that guy Vegapunk, I have to think about myself. Facing the hard fists of everyone in Turtle Island, Guy rubbed his hands and licked his face. Answer questions honestly. Although I have only been exposed to a small part of the knowledge about lineage factors before, but when the experimental data are all clear, please believe that I will not fail. This is my confidence as a scientist. Better so. After the beating was over, Ratchet also brought a coffin-like seafloor stone box to the crowd. Lord Loya, everything is ready. Very good, I'll leave it to you next. Loya nodded, then looked at Geisa. Guy floated lightly and came to the top of the seafloor stone box to observe carefully. Except for the certain gaps at the collusion point, the other aspects are indeed perfect and can be used for testing. Then let's start experimenting now. Is it my time? K. Rockville, who had been waiting for a long time, stood up, tore off the white cloth that had been wrapped around his waist, and got into the box naked. According to the information sent by Vegapunk, the special energy that can be absorbed by humans in the devil fruit will spill out after the fruit is broken. The only known thing at present is the seafloor stone rich in pyrobrine horny particles. In order to hinder this escape behavior, not even another nemesis, seawater. It is normal to think about this situation. Not to mention the number of capable people who drown in the sea every year, there are still a dozen or so, right? If the seawater can prevent the devil in the devil fruit from escaping, how will the new fruit appear? Aren't they all stuck at the bottom of the sea? The principle of this experiment is to use the characteristics of the devil in the devil fruit that needs to find the host again after escaping, and force it to integrate into the only object in a space where it can never escape. Simple and rude, but highly feasible. Identifying problems is far more important than solving them. No matter whether the method is simple or not, being able to perceive the mystery in it, the scientific research ability of Vegapunk can be imagined. Since weapons such as swords can be the hosts of devils, what about the rest of the matter? Of course it is also possible. Therefore, Krokdar can't go in with clothes on, and if there are other objects, then there is no guarantee that the devil will lodge in the designated target as required. It was even said that in order to avoid accidents, the hair and nails on K. Rockdal's head were shaved, and they were as bare as a plucked turkey stuffed into the oven. There were also adults present, and they were not surprised, and they were not interested in K. Rockdale's body. Except for Drake's eyes shining brightly and having a feeling of finding a comrade, the rest of them were very calm. Holding the rustling fruit, K. Rockdale stood in the box and waited quietly for the box to close. Jingle jingle. The seafloor stone slats used to seal the package were placed on the reserved screw holes. Ratchet made a gesture. Geisa quickly came to Loya and said, Lord Loya, please do me a favor next. Quote. Understood. No matter how small a gap is, it is a gap. Compared with the gap between material molecules such as seafloor stone, the inconspicuous gap is bigger than the sky. Even if the outside air can no longer penetrate, but to be on the safe side, the positions of these gaps still need to be filled. There are not so many cutting-edge technologies in the Vegapunk laboratory. Loya and the others decided to solve this problem with a local method. High concentration energy can prevent low concentration energy from passing through. No matter what is working in the devil fruit, it is also a kind of energy. In the face of Loya's extremely high level of dragon-killing magic at the moment, he has the confidence to ensure that the devil cannot escape. If it is simply to use the magic package, it may be prone to accidents, but if it is just to make up for a little gap, Roja still has this confidence. Stay back a little. While talking, Loya slowly walked towards the seafloor sarcophagus. Hearing this, the rest of the people were stunned for a moment, and then fled in panic. They are not weak. Anyone placed in the sea is a strong man. But even so, Loya still vigilantly said the words, go back a little bit. One can imagine how terrifying the ability he will use next. Soon, the entire beach was emptied, and apart from the various materials left here, no one could be seen. Perceiving that the rest of the people were hiding a few hundred meters away, Loya stirred up the magic power on his body and held a blue energy that seemed to exist in his hand. His strongest freezing magic is no more than Mokobatmo, which can freeze time and space, but it is more like an intervention, which makes local time stagnate, which is fundamentally different from ice. In addition, in terms of the freezing effect, Loya's most powerful ability is the Dragon Slayer profound truth that he realized early on, the land of the end. Suddenly, Luoya raised his head sharply, exuding a terrifying dragon might from his body, and then forcefully crushed the energy light ball in his palm. Dragon Slayer profound truth, the land of the end. Ha! The cold wind is blowing. Swish! The earth is white. A terrifying cold air that penetrated deep into the soul swept over, and all the existences on Turtle Island fell into a trance in an instant. In that instant, they all felt a feeling more terrifying than death. An absolute silence. There are no words to describe the momentary and silent feeling between heaven and earth. Because even their thinking stopped completely at that moment, as quiet as a pale picture scroll. In the land of the end, this dragon-killing mystery that has accompanied Loya for many years, finally bloomed its due demeanor in Loya's peak state. After a few breaths, Robin broke free from the suffocating contradictory illusion, breathed out a breath of white smoke silently, and said with emotion, "When O'Hara was destroyed, I was thinking, how powerful can human power be?" Degree. Looking at the beach in the distance, she pursed her lips and smiled. Maybe now, I have found the answer. Chapter 483 Storm is Coming. Land of the End is not only able to cover this small beach. Loya deliberately controlled the intensity so that they had the opportunity to express their emotions. Because of this trick, Loya can even create a huge ice field that can be clearly seen from space on this vast and great route. However, even if the strength is controlled, the aftermath emanating from Land of the End is shocking enough. At this moment, whether it is the captives on Turtle Island or Ulysses and other subordinates, they finally have a clear understanding of Loya's power. Monet and others are even more sad, and it is no wonder that the other party will only send one of his men to deal with Brother Doflamingo. It turns out that for him, his young master is so useless, he can't bear to look directly at him. When a group of people hurried back to the beach, Loya had gathered the dragon's might and magic, leaving only a white coffin standing on the golden sand. As if the white snowfield had never appeared before, the sea still slapped the coast recklessly. This is also what Loya did intentionally. The most terrifying thing about ice attribute power is not the damage caused by the moment of contact, but the extreme cold that follows. If the ice here is not dissipated, Loya guarantees that no one will be able to approach this place alive. But even so, several living people were shivering and rubbing their arms together to generate heat. The sand that looks warm and warm under the eyes is actually still exuding a cold enough to freeze people to death. Hurry up, throw the box into the sea. Guy was trembling all over Kiba, and he couldn't speak properly. This is the most critical step of the experiment. Although the pyrob-broin horny particles in the seawater are not as dense as those in the seafloor stone, the number there occupies an absolute advantage, and it can also cause a certain restraint effect on the devil in the devil fruit. Just like the seafloor stone is a flame, it can be burned directly, then the seawater is a hot furnace, and high temperature can also play a certain role. The two complement each other and are one of the inevitable elements for the success of the experiment. The Vegapunk experiment used a method of wrapping the seafloor stone implements with seawater in a highly compressed state in a sealed chamber. Loya and the others don't have this condition, so they can only use the soil method to throw the box directly into the sea. Of course, this frozen coffin had to be handled by Roha himself, otherwise Guy would have to tear off a layer of skin just by touching it. Only Roha, the master, can ignore the magic power in the ice cube, pull it out of the ground and throw it into the sea. The Severalton Halu sarcophagus was as light as nothing in Loya's hands. He grabbed the lower edge of the coffin and lifted it up hard. Let's go. PFFT. The coffin crossed an arc in the sky, and then fell into the sea not far away. Before the splashed seawater fell to the ground, it was frozen into shattered ice by the terrifying cold, and slapped a group of people. Clap his hands. Loya raised his head and asked, "What do I do next?" Wait. Wait. That's right. Guy ignited the gas on his body, produced and sold it himself, and then gathered with a group of people to bake the fire. The reason why Vegapunk can only make devil fruit items is because of this process. It takes too long. Only items that don't need to eat, drink, and breathe can persist during that experiment until they are parasitized by devil fruits, and it is difficult for a living person to achieve that condition. And because of the ceiling measures and the number of sea towers produced, Vegapunk can't provide a space large enough for living people to conduct experiments. Ulysses pulled out an iron pot out of nowhere, poured hot water on Guy's body, brewed UHT and distributed it to a group of living people. Taking a sip of UHT, Robin said after feeling a little warm in his stomach. So Vegapunk's move should also have a purpose of verification. He wants to test whether the human body can complete this experiment. And your group of undead soldiers who don't eat, drink, and sleep is an unprecedented challenge. Excellent material. Quote. Is that so? Loya nodded, and understood Vegapunk's intentions. The world's #1 brain, this calculation really lives up to its reputation. On the bright side, it seems that his side has taken advantage of it, but I believe that as long as Rockville regains the ability of the rustling fruit, it will also be of great help to his own experiments. There is a clear conspiracy in front of you, and the fruit of Loya must be eaten even if it is not eaten. Vegapunk, I really want to meet this guy. The imminent emergency meeting of world governments has become the hottest topic of the year, or rather, the most talked about event of this era. In the 19th year after Roger's death, the pattern of the 4 emperors has been set, the Chihuahua is facing drastic changes, and the Navy and the world government are brewing separately. In just a few days, the world discovered that everything that was familiar in the past was moving away from them. It is still the same sea, the same sparkling, vast and boundless, but in the depths of the sea, many things have become different. The Antonio family has settled in the center of power. I am afraid that only the top existence of Akatsuki's past can be known how deep the water is. It is no exaggeration to say that this is a major historical event that is in no way inferior to Roger's execution of the era of great pirates. The wheel of this era will start turning from this moment, turning to an unknown world that Loya no longer knows. Great Airway, Windmill Town. This town that walked out of the naval hero Carp has fallen into a rare silence in recent days. Carp has been back to his hometown for several days, and every time he returns home, he is accompanied by a grand banquet. Because he is not only a famous Navy hero in the sea, but also a part of this town and the closest family member to everyone. But this time back, Carp didn't answer anything about the emergency meeting, shutting himself up in a dilapidated log cabin away from the crowd, not communicating with anyone. His beloved grandson, Monkey D. Luffy, knocked on the door several times, but Garp didn't even pay attention to it, and was as quiet as a statue. There is only one table and one chair in the cabin. Carp was sitting in a chair, and in front of him, on the wooden table, lay a loaf of bread, a glass of water, and an invitation. It was an invitation letter from the tea party held by the 5 Old Stars, an invitation letter that was many times higher than the high-end tea party held by the 4 Emperors, Charlotte Lingling in Wangguo. However, it was the 3rd time in his life that he had received an invitation letter of this level. The first time was after Roger's execution, and the second time was after Dorag defected from the Navy and formed a Silence Army. And the 3rd time is now. It's just that unlike the last 2 times when the 5 Old Stars sent the invitation directly to him, this time only Sengoku was invited. His invitation letter was distributed to him by Sengoku using the privilege of participating. What Loya didn't know was that the only people invited to this tea party were those whose names were outlined in gold. However, each invitee has the right to invite others independently once, and the rest shall not interfere and do not need to be notified. The Vegapunks and the Antonios used this opportunity on Loya, and Sengoku used it on Garp. Not everything is as clean and clear as what the world looks like, as it appears before the eyes of the world. In many cases, secret transactions are essential after all. The last 2 tea parties gave Karp an indelible memory, and also made him clearly realize what a despicable and dirty thing the so-called right is. He doesn't like it because he is arrogant by nature, otherwise he wouldn't shirk his promotion to a general several times, and be a middle-class person in a dashing and unrestrained manner. Dreams are what this world should have. Karp deeply hates these shady things. But even if he wasn't directly invited, this time he had to go. Because this tea party is bigger than before, the number of participants will be an unprecedented terrifying number. And the things they are going to discuss, compared to the big secret treasures and historical texts, are not much less. Hurrah! Suddenly, a gust of wind blew through the window, slapping and creaking the long-abandoned cottage. The 16-year-old monkey D. Luffy, wearing a Yuhi-colored jacket and the straw hat that Shanks gave him, slapped the door outside and shouted, "Grandpa! The storm is coming. God is going to change." Karp sighed a long time. Can this broken house survive this storm? He picked up the invitation letter and put it into Kabuto, kicking open the door that had been in disrepair. Just listening to the bang-caw, the door of the room was kicked and flew out by Garp, and Luffy, who was still in front of the door, was attached to the opposite tree trunk. "What's the noise? I'm not a fool. Luffy, where did you go?" Chapter 484. Hear the voice of all things. There is a causal cycle in everything in the world, and 2 things that often seem to be unrelated, have an inevitable connection inside. When one disappears, the other ends with it. Everyone wants the results to move in the direction they predict, but as pawns in the game, all they can do is resign. Outsiders, on the other hand, can break the cause and effect with their own hands and play chess. The One Piece world where Loya is located is the chess game, but the chess player is not Loya himself. Just like I said before, the pieces in the game can only be pieces forever. When he stepped into the world of One Piece, his identity as a chess player was isolated from him, endless and without end. This is between the dream worlds like the vast universe, where countless illusions are born and destroyed here. As the guardian of dreams, the Golden Dragon has stood here for countless epochs, and has long lost its initial attention to the life and death of illusions. Where will the Phantom of Destruction go? Where did the new fantasy world come from? These questions plagued the Golden Dragon for a long time, until he was tired of exploring its mysteries. Not just bored, he even said he had already started to hate everything around him. These illusions that keep appearing and disappearing, like the most annoying mosquitoes, buzzing constantly, always coiled in his mind. Why should I protect this place? And why don't I want to leave? These questions, the Golden Dragon himself can't answer. He just repeats the same task silently, identifying those who break in. Traversers. Then put them into the illusion one by one as nourishment, so that the illusion can continue to exist. Some people have reached the pinnacle of life in fantasy, holding great power and overlooking the world. Some people are mediocre in the fantasy world, groveling and lingering. These have nothing to do with him as a guardian. His mission and meaning is to repeat this work, repeating it again and again in this dream without the concept of time and space. Until one day, that girl came. Until one day, that man came. Hum. Boom. Suddenly, the whole dream began to tremble. In the cosmic galaxy, black cracks continued to appear, swallowing the surrounding illusions one by one. There were a few grains of rice missing in the paddy field. The Golden Dragon didn't care. What he cared about was the source of the shock. A golden gate hangs above the deepest star sea. Compared with all the illusions around it, this gate is even bigger and more splendid. Compared with it, the rest of the illusions are like fireflies in a summer night, dim and small. Only it, Kamui, is magnificent, like a bright moon, noble and elegant. People dare not look directly. However, what is going on at this gate has absolutely nothing to do with its noble appearance. At this moment, countless fantasy gates close to this place are falling apart and become the first particles of the universe. Then, Those fragments are like sugar melted in water, and are gradually attracted by the gate and merged with it. Each fusion seems to be supplementing it with nutrients, making the door brighter and bigger. Illusions can interfere with and touch each other, so of course, illusions can also devour each other. It's just that the chance of such a thing happening is very small. In the countless epics that the Golden Dragon has guarded here, there are only 3 examples. And 2 of them also failed, and the collapse caused the dream to turn into nothingness in an instant, leaving him still floating in the dark universe. Don't be so impatient, it's still a long way off, kid. Noticing the reaction of the gate, the Golden Dragon lifted the huge dragon claw, which was large enough to traverse a star, and lightly tapped it on the gate. Invisible fluctuations spread out, the cracks slowly healed, and the gate stopped swallowing. Everything, as always, continues to rise and fall. You too, don't be impatient, Ivy. The Golden Dragon opened his mouth and said, the next moment, the door trembled inexplicably, and then fell silent again. One Piece World, Turtle Island. After more than half a month of restless sleep, Jones finally found what he wanted. Without speaking, he pushed open the door with a haggard face and put a sorted document in front of Loya. I found it, Captain. Well, put it there. Loya responded lightly, and then continued to write in his hand. Jones didn't leave either, standing beside him waiting for Loya to finish his work. Loya is now sorting out the questions that may occur at the tea party and the questions that can be raised. From his original intention, these things don't matter. Anyway, the final result still needs to be spoken with fists. But he couldn't bear the insistence of Simon and others. He had to sort them out. Then, based on your own knowledge and the advantages of being familiar with the original work, select reasonable and unreasonable content and rearrange them. After half an hour, Loya finally finished her work and stretched a lot. It was only then that he raised his hand to pick up the document, flipped through it hastily, and finally gave an evaluation. It's no use. Indeed, even if Jones was exhausted to find such detailed information, it had nothing to do with what Loya was doing. Things that can be solved with fists, relying on these twists and turns to solve, trouble and inefficiency. But at least give this information to Mr. Zephyr, please, Captain. For Jones' insistence, Loya raised his eyelids. Well, if you will. Seeing Loya nodding, a smile finally appeared on Jones' tired face, as if a big rock had finally been put down. Thank you. My own people, not to mention those. Loya waved his hands casually, showing quite indifference. But soon, a serious expression appeared on his face, and he looked at Jones, who was covered in dust and a stubby beard. If you really thank me, you will be obedient in the future, understand? Understood. Unloading a heavy burden, Jones staggered out of the door. Then, Loya picked up the document again and silently read every word on it. On the title, it is, Listen to the Voice of All Things. This is the basis for Roger to become the Pirate King. Or maybe it was his destiny. The fate of the D family, the fate of the world, all condensed on this legendary man on that day. He succeeded, but also failed. But the gear he was pushing, after all, still slowly began to turn in the direction he expected. Pioneers. Loya felt that this title was more suitable for Roger than One Piece. But who would have thought that Jones, as a Tianlong person, would have such an ability? The doubts hidden in history may be deeper than what he discovered, so deep that even the world government, even the blank 100 years, can't explain it at all. Chapter 485 The True Face of Beast Language Fruit. End of this volume. But no matter what you think, this information must not be revealed. You must know that this, listening to the voice of all things, is not unique compared to the ethereal, big secret treasure, and the blank 100-year history. This is the reason why Doflamingo wants to get Jones. Roger has proved the power of this power with actual behavior, so he wants to use Jones' power to control the switch of this world. And then, he failed, leaving no soul residue behind. Everyone tacitly forgot about it, as if this person had never appeared in the world. And the Chiwahai, Moonlight, Moria, who has long since disappeared in the long river of history, wants to rely on this power to become one piece. Well, of course, there is the most important point. Jones' fruit ability also makes Moria salivate. Beast language fruit. This is just the name Jones himself gave later. In the past, he thought that his ability to communicate with animals was bestowed by the unrecorded devil fruit. But now he understands that it is only the listening to the voice of all things contained in his body that awakened at that time, giving him the ability to communicate with animals. Because of the stimulation he received when his body mutated after eating the devil fruit, or for some other reason, at a very coincidental moment, Jones awakened this power. And the real face of beast language fruit is actually completely unrelated to the word, beast language. Mariah has the most say in this matter. After all, his family, the ancestors of the past, are the ones who are capable of this fruit. Moria prefers to call it an evolutionary fruit rather than a name like beast language fruit. Yes, evolution. Just like the development direction Jones is currently developing, he tries to have the agility of the black king snake while having the defense of the lava turtle, and then gradually integrates the power of the silverback great ape and the flying ability of the feather king eagle. Therefore, deformation and fusion are only the basic abilities of this fruit, and the final stage of the evolution fruit is to allow the able body to evolve into a perfect creature with no weaknesses at all. According to the information left by Hogbuck, the ancestor of Moria, the legendary existence has even evolved to the stage where it can survive in a vacuum. What a terrifying creature this is. Whether it's a distant attack or melee combat, whether it's a sea of fire or ice, it doesn't matter to him. It's the strongest creature, in that perfect form. Compared with the current, strongest creatures in the sea, land and air, and one of the 4 emperors, there are many beast sky, which is not the same level at all. It can be said that apart from the devil fruit's nemesis, Pyrob Broin horny particles, looking at the world, nothing can restrain him. It's just, even if it evolved into that form, the legendary figure has forgotten a problem. He only considered how to survive in various environments, but ignored the question of how long life itself can survive. Yes. This legendary figure who disappeared in the long river of history, the final result is not a vigorous death in battle, not a grievance under conspiracy and tricks, but a clear death at the age of 107. It's sad, and a little funny. And even if he dies, his corpse, which has evolved to an almost perfect form in addition to its lifespan, will not disappear with the disappearance of the fruit ability. In other words, the devil in the fruit of evolution simply does not have the ability to erase this perfect corpse. Even if the support of the fruit ability is lost, the existence of the body itself is beyond the control of the devil. It is like a tree rooted in the ground, budding and growing. Even if the soil eventually disappears, the trees that have grown up will still exist in the world themselves. And just like the fallen tree, the corpse turned into an unconscious body that could be easily manipulated by others. With the corpse left by this ancestor, Moria's family has been living and prospering on the Great Root for more than 400 years. It can be said to be famous. He was able to become a 7 Wuhai, when he failed to challenge Guy many times and had to get out of the New World in embarrassment. In fact, he also had such a family background in it. It was not until decades ago that the ancestor's body was so rotten that the family was finally destroyed by the peeps of the pirates. Hear the voice of all things, the devil fruit that evolves into a perfect creature. All kinds of coincidences are condensed on Jones. According to the law of heaven will bring great responsibility to man, maybe all the disasters he suffered in this life are actually destined. It's time for the tea party. Let Sengoku bring a letter. Loya thinks so. He has a special status now, and swaggering to the naval headquarters, I am afraid it will cause unnecessary disputes. Before the tea party was over, Loya didn't want to do too many things that would involve a series of variables. The New World, within the territory of the 4 emperors, Yuhifa, Shanks. Still the island, still the sea. There is still laughter and laughter on the island, and cups are exchanged. Just on the east side of the island, a tomb was erected. Ace's lost crew is buried there, looking out in the direction of the rising sun. Oh, so there's an unknown tea party going on before then. Holding the wine barrel and nibbling on the big flesh and blood, Shanks looked at the man sitting beside him with a surprised expression. The man's eyes were like eagles, and he was wearing a jet-black trench coat lined with wine yuhi. No matter who it is, at first glance, he will be shocked by his sharp eyes, and then, he will be attracted by the pitch-black cross knife behind him. Supreme Swordsman 12 Works Black Sword Knight. The world's largest swordsman, Hawkeye, Jorakal Mahawk. Seeing Shanks holding the invitation letter that shook the world with his big oily hand, he understood that he had to do this because he only had one hand, but Mahawk, who had always been calm, still twitched the corners of his mouth involuntarily, speaking earnestly. Said, "You better not get it dirty, trust me. You'll know what despair is when the world government joins forces with the Draconians and the Navy. Hold the grass." Hearing this, Shanks shook his hands, loosened his grip on the meat and the invitation, and let the golden-crusted paper flutter in the wind. Looking in that direction, it is the center of the bonfire where everyone is sitting. "Ya butterfly. Hey." Mahawk sighed impatiently, and the black knife suddenly swung out. Shanks only saw a black silk thread streaking through the air, and the invitation letter stopped firmly on the wide black knife yi. On the knife. Under the black knife, there is a roaring bonfire, exuding scorching heat. Taking the invitation back into his arms again, Mahawk drank the wine dully and fell into contemplation. Sure enough, it was a mistake to come here, right? Don't have any expectations for this guy Shanks. Peace of mind. Shanks smiled drunkenly, and clapped his only hand on Mahawk's shoulder. "If there is any danger, say hello, and I'll save you. You know I didn't mean that. And..." Huh. Swish. The black knife swung again, cutting the steak under the two men's buttocks in half. Shanks retracted his only arm and exclaimed exaggeratedly, "Hey. You are serious. Don't rub oil on my clothes with your dirty hand." It was late at night, and Mahawk was sitting on his boat, floating on the sea with the waves. He lay in the boat and looked up at the bright moon. Suddenly, a dark cloud drifted past, blocking the moonlight. Black and white, light and dark, this conversion came so suddenly. But, clang. Standing up, with the black knife in hand, an invisible sword intent spread out in all directions. The crisp humming sound resounded through the sea, telling the spirit of the world's greatest swordsman. Then Mahawk moved. I saw him raise his hand slightly, and a sword chi shot into the sky, breaking the dark cloud from it, revealing the bright moon behind it blocked by it. Even if the coffin boat was no longer in sight, Shanks knew that it was what Mahawk called it. The moonlight shines on his face clearly, illuminating the profile of the intern on the one-piece ship. Shanks raised his glass and pointed in the direction Mahawk left. "Good luck, friend." Then took a sip from the glass. Time goes by, fleetingly. At a time when the forces of all parties were turbulent, the time finally came to the day when this incredible tea party was about to be held. The Holy Land Mary Joa, as the place where the Tianlong people live, the prosperity of this place is far beyond the imagination of the world, which is exactly the old saying. Do you think rich people are happy? No, you can't imagine the happiness of rich people. Forgive my bluntness, poverty limits your imagination. That's probably what it means. As an admiral, it is not the first time that Sengoku has set foot on this land that symbolizes holiness and authority, but every time he comes here, he feels at a loss. On the other side of the street, when he last came, there was still a huge and imposing opera house. But now that opera house is gone. Into a bigger opera house. There are Tianlong people wearing different emblems everywhere on the street, holding their slaves arrogantly and walking on the street. As a nobleman of the world, Tianlong people enjoy the enshrinement of all the member countries. Even if the country is starving and empty, the amount of gold that should be turned over is still not less. Paper drunk gold fan. Wine pool meat forest. These words are no longer enough to describe their extravagant days. No one has the right to accuse or judge them, because they are Tianlong people, world nobles, descendants of the Creator. Even if a slave was executed on the street over there, Sengoku could only pretend he didn't see it, selectively ignored it, and walked towards the office building of the world government. The reporting place for this tea party was the top floor of the main building of the world government, a luxurious castle in the sky that enjoys the reputation of top of the cloud. After taking 2 steps, Sengoku suddenly remembered something and turned his head to look. Cap, you bastard, hurry up for me. Chapter 486 Login. Holy Land, Mary Joa. PFF ha ha ha, don't be so serious, Sengoku. Look, the senbei there are pretty good. Although he was dressed in a dog-like suit and leather shoes, with the righteous cloak symbolizing the majesty of the navy on his back, Carp at the moment did not have the air of a Navy hero at all. Retired veterans. Seeing Sengoku's about to explode expression at this moment, Carp didn't care. He shoved the donut into his mouth with a smile, and then handed it to Sengoku. Don't put on a sullen face, come here, eat one for you. Eat a fart. Sengoku snatched the donut from Carp's hand, stuffed it into his mouth, and said vaguely, do you need me to tell you how important this tea party is? Cheer me up, bastard. Hey, got it, got it. Facing the vicious Sengoku, Garp clasped his nostrils and looked up at the sky. Really, if I knew I had brought Crane here. Sengoku took a deep breath and suppressed the volcano that was about to erupt in his heart. Of course, this sentence is just to say, such a large-scale tea party is rare even in history. The worst plan is nothing more than a war. At that time, the battle between dragons and tigers was far beyond ordinary people's imagination. Although Crane was resourceful enough, his wrist was still more than 10% worse than Garp. If it wasn't for Garp's strength, Sengoku would have said nothing to bring this bastard here. After Garp's lesson, Sengoku dragged the collar of a lieutenant general in a dog's hat and walked towards the building with the flag of the world government. At the corner of the street, a group of soldiers guarding the man in the middle is also heading in this direction. It's hard to believe that even in this holy place, Mary Joa, where the streets are full of Tianlong people, this team of soldiers still walks in the middle of the avenue, turning a blind eye to the Tianlong people in front of them. No one dared to come up to block, question, or ask, not even the mighty Tianlong people, who had to take the initiative to retreat and stand on both sides of the road. This group of arrogant and domineering Tianlong people had to be so polite, because the emblem on the chest of this group of soldiers, the pair of open wings, was the clan emblem of the Antonio family. Tianlong people are also graded, and the Antonio family is undoubtedly the most top and powerful family. Wherever the soldiers went, even the Tianlong man who shot his slave before did not dare to stand in the middle of the road arrogantly, and silently retreated to the side of the road. This scene fell in Mahawk's eyes, and he was suddenly more curious about the family where his teacher belonged. That's right, the one being escorted by the soldiers at the moment is the world's largest swordsman, Hawkeye, Mahawk, who was invited to the tea party. He didn't know why he was able to get on the stage of the pinnacle of power, but he knew that even if he didn't come, history would be reversed as always. In this case, why not leave your footprints on the most incredible stage in this world? And the truth that the master didn't want to go back until he died, Mahawk felt that he had to explore the root cause. Soon, Mahawk was led by a team of soldiers to the front of the World Government Office building. Looking up at this terrifying building in symbolic meaning, Mahawk calmed down and walked in. But at this moment, an overwhelming terrifying coercion suddenly swept the entire Mary Joa, and even if he stood still, it gave him the illusion of suffocation in the mud. But soon, he burst out with sword intent, liberated himself from this terrifying dragon might, and calmly placed his hand on the hilt of the black knife. Starting so soon. Already prepared for the war, Mahawk showed a smile on the corner of his mouth. The world's largest swordsman is not afraid of any challenges. However, just as he was looking for the enemy, an incomparably loud voice resounded through the sky, offsetting the suffocating pressure with an extremely calm and peaceful aura. Stop it. Today is not the day to fight. The sound came from the sky. Mahak immediately raised his head and looked up, and then his pupils shrank suddenly. At the top of the building, a huge golden figure stood there. The golden brilliance spreads in all directions, like a majestic Buddha that cannot be directly looked at. The fruit of everyone and the ability of the Buddha form, the commander-in-chief of the Navy headquarters, the Sengoku of the Buddha. Opposite him, a crystal dragon head, the size of which is comparable to the entire building, is 100 meters above the ground, calmly watching the golden Buddha in front of him. Only after looking up did Mahak realize that this was an unreasonably huge dragon. It stepped on the street of Mary Joa with one paw and filled the entire street. Landing on all fours, whether it was a celestial dragon or a commoner slave, all suffered heavy casualties under that enormous size. As soon as the tail swayed, large tracts of buildings were swept away, leaving ruins everywhere, as if they had been baptized by cannonballs. The cries and scoldings are connected together, and the scene can be described as quite festive. The last time Mary Joa became so lively was when the Murloc hero Tiger freed the slaves. But the damage he caused at that time was far from comparable to that of this giant dragon swinging its body at will. The huge and ferocious jaw opened and closed, and Mahak's somewhat familiar voice resounded through the sky. There was a bit of playfulness in that voice, a bit of curiosity, and a bit of tyranny and madness suppressed. Oh, isn't this going to fight me directly? Even if compared to himself, the Buddha Sengoku in front of him seemed so insignificant, Loya still couldn't underestimate the Madara white old man. And behind him, several powerful auras that are no weaker than Sengoku suddenly rose, and they competed with Loya's terrifying dragon power in the air. Under the pressure of the two, the air above the sky garden shot out one after another astonishing red Yuhi lightning, like the end of a natural disaster. I'm getting more and more curious, what can you say? The dragon chuckled lightly, with a scrutiny in his eyes. Keeping his eyes on the other people in the sky garden, after a pause, Loya said slowly, "It's okay. Since everyone is here, I'll listen." The next moment, the huge and incomparably huge dragon body suddenly exploded, turning into clumps of hard ice and falling from the sky. These ice cubes may no longer be described by artillery shells. The size of the ice cubes is like smashing down an island. The situation is still urgent, but at least that guy has given up on attacking. This made Sengoku heave a sigh of relief, and at the same time, the shock wave condensed in his palm slammed into the air, smashing the huge iceberg that was about to fall to the ground into pieces. Bang! For the residents of Marijoa, the shattered ice is still a great threat, but fortunately there is no such terrifying size that it can't compete. Slaves and masters from all walks of life all shot, smashing the fragments into small ice crystals that are not threatening. A black shadow flashed, and there was a cold wind in the air, and Loya had appeared in the center of the sky garden. The collar of the white cape has a circle of soft fluff as white as a cloud, wrapped around the neck, and the lining is azure blue like the sea and the sky. A white background with blue stripes has the formality of a suit and the casual look of a casual outfit. The pattern with the Yunlong glyph is coiled around the body, adding a touch of mystery to it. Robin's long black and thick hair has been carefully taken care of by Robin. It is lazy but chic at the same time. The roots of the pair of ferocious and domineering dragon horns are looming in the black hair. Crazy Eyes, the name of the most evil dragon, can be clearly displayed in front of the world. At the same time, Loyana's height of over 3 meters is enough for him to look down on the group of masters in front of him who are the most powerful beings in the world. Looks like everyone's here. Well, a few more. Chapter 487 The Tea Party begins. There are 8 names that appear on the Tea Party list, of which the 3 characters, 5 old stars, represent 5 people, which means there are 12 in total. Including Loya who was invited to participate, there should be only 13 people here. But it was clear that the number of people present far exceeded the unlucky number, 13. Not to mention, Navy Hero, and Iron Fist, Garp, who should not have appeared here, are the existences other than these 13 people. Hey, you boy, why are you here? Others don't know, but Garp, who had a brief fight with Roja, knew very well how overwhelming power this guy in front of him had. Even if he is strong, as long as he doesn't do anything that endangers peace itself, Garp doesn't bother to pay attention to him. For example, the world's strongest, Whitebeard, who hangs with a group of children on the Moby Dick all day, enjoys his family's happiness, and will not pose much threat to them at all. But Loya and Whitebeard are different. The words he said when he left the Navy have been tabooed by the world government until now, and even he and Sengoku dare not discuss it without permission. All the deeds after that show that this person has no sympathy for the world government. If you let him in, wouldn't you put yourself and the tiger in the same cage? What the hell are these idiots thinking about the world government? Lieutenant General Karp, it's been a long time. Seeing him, Loya couldn't help but think of the iron fist that Karp came straight to him that day. A smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. Loya spread out his hands. From his arms take out the golden-crusted invitation. Don't you understand why I'm here? That's an invitation to a tea party. Only the first 12 people on the tea party list can invite others. There is no need to say much about the invitation letter in Loya's hand to know that someone gave it to him. In the crowd, a middle-aged man with fluffy hair and Antonio Shinlua wearing an owl mask looked at the paper in Loya's hand at the same time, and then turned their eyes away without a trace. Cut. This invitation signifies absolute authority. Now that Loya has appeared here, let alone a small lieutenant general of the Navy headquarters, even Gang Kuo Kong, the commander-in-chief of the entire army, does not have the right to question it. Karp didn't say much, biting the donut. His bulging muscles slackened, and he sat back in his seat. Clap clap clap. At this time, the blonde man among the 5 old stars clapped his hands, attracting everyone's attention. He was wearing a decent suit, his expression was calm, and his face was not angry or arrogant. No matter who invites you, as long as you hold the invitation letter, you are our guest. After a pause, he narrowed his eyes slightly. Of course, since it's a guest, please abide by the master's rules. Fighting is absolutely not allowed here. Every event that determines the direction of history is accompanied by this kind of tea party. If the participants had to rely on their fists to decide the outcome every time, then the 5 old stars would have given up this stupid behavior. It can't be said that there is absolutely no, but it is very unlikely that this will happen unless it is absolutely necessary. After all, this is the Holy Land Mary Joa. Even if Whitebeard and Roger, who were at their peak when they were young, come here together, the 5 old stars are sure to keep them. The terrifying power gathered here is far beyond the imagination of the world. An ice dragon, Loya is not enough to make the 5 old stars helpless. Of course, in the same way, no matter who came, the 5 old stars must also abide by the agreement and must not attack them without authorization. After thinking about it, the blonde man said to Loya, I think it's better not to have a second time for the commotion just now. No problem. As a guest, I still have the bottom line of morality. Loya shrugged, looking harmless to humans and animals. At this moment, a man in a black windbreaker walked in at the entrance of the Hanging Garden. Even in the summit meeting where the powerhouses gathered, he was like a sharp blade out of its sheath, with imposing aura like a rainbow. Hawkeye Mahawk. Loya narrowed his eyes, thinking who would invite this guy. When he was on the desert island, he had a relationship with Mahawk. The more he knows, the more he can see the truth behind the matter. From today's Loya's point of view, the 3 words, Chiwahai, are simply wronging him. Compared with the group of Chiwahai whose funny meaning is stronger than their strength and ambition, Mahawk's power is not on the same level. World's First has a gold content that is many times higher than that of Chiwahai. Moreover, seeing Mahawk, Loya remembered the long knife that disappeared after turning it over, the dazzling light that blinded the eyes, but it made Dalmesia and Huo Shaoshan suffer a lot. Why was Mahawk there at that time? Loya already had some answers in his heart at this moment. Seeing Mahawk coming, the blonde man frowned, but quickly relaxed. He looked around and asked, although there is still one missing, there must be some repetitions among the members you invited. No one answered this question, and everyone was thinking about it, and they sat silently in their seats and drank tea. For some people, it was the first time to participate in such a posture, and it would be a little bit too quiet to talk about it, such as Loya. Some people have participated many times and know that this is not the first time that such a thing has happened, so they continue to drink tea calmly, such as Carp. As a result, the core of the world government and a member of the dignified 5 old stars, his question was ignored by everyone, and he was helpless and stiff. The air suddenly filled with a smell called embarrassment, mixed with the aroma of various snacks, which could not be dissipated for a long time. Cough cough. I think it should be like this. Sengoku glanced at Carp, who was eating his plate beside him, and took the initiative to stand up. Although this is the first time I have participated in this kind of event, but I also understand that the matter to be discussed today is very urgent. So please start the 5 old stars. Start. What to start with? At every tea party, someone would ask this question, and they felt that the 5 old stars called them together to deal with some issues that would affect the world in internal transactions. Regarding this situation, the blonde man was very calm and took the conversation. You seem to have misunderstood the point, Sengoku. The blonde man said, this is a tea party, not a world conference. There is no saying that who starts and who ends. If everyone has no opinion, it is not a problem to end it now. While a group of people were frowning and thinking, he picked up the teacup, walked slowly towards Mahawk, and stopped at the distance within the reach of the world's greatest swordsman with his sword. Mr. Mahawk, can you come over here? The first object turned out to be me. Mahawk, who had just arrived, was stunned, then stood up and followed the blonde man to the corner of the garden. Immediately, the staff who had been waiting at the entrance quickly ran to the two of them and placed a small box at their feet. Hum. There was a sudden light sound in the air, and the position where the two were located instantly became quiet. Even with the powerful hearing of the Loya dragon's body, it is impossible to hear what the two of them are discussing. Seeing this scene, those who participated in the tea party for the first time immediately understood how to deal with it. With their own goals in mind, they searched for their own goals in the garden. Looking at the box blankly, to be honest, Loya is a little confused at the moment. A box alone can isolate the perception of observation hockey and the transmission of sound in the air. This is really the world of One Piece. Are you sure it's not a future sci-fi movie? At this moment, there was footsteps in his ears, and the whirring of the wind kept ringing, as if the clothes the person was wearing were very windproof. Mr. Loya, I have something to talk to you about. Loya heard this voice a few times, and in the face of the invitation, he turned his head with a smile. No problem, Dr. Vegapunk. Chapter 488 SOS. One of the 2 invitation letters in Loya's hand was from Vegapunk, plus the big gift he gave him. The friendly attitude was undoubtedly revealed, and Loya was also happy to chat with him, check out some information. The two sat at the white dining table, and the staff ran over and put the small box that can isolate sound and sight at their feet. It was a 20-centimeter square metal box, and the 4 corners of the front up end were lit with green indicator lights. Before it was placed on the ground, these lights were all turned off. There is something similar to a baffle around the box, with circular holes the size of a thumb distributed in a hexagon. Through the circular hole, Loya can see the complex instrument construction inside. Seeing that Loya's attention was on the box, Vegapunk smiled. This is a gadget I invented. With your observational power, I believe that the specific effect does not need me to explain more. As for how it works. Vegapunk looked up at Loya. It's like rustling fruit. Same as salsa fruit. Roha immediately understood what Vegapunk wanted to explain. Presumably this invention was also a devil fruit item he created after he discovered the conditions for conveying the devil fruit. Not only these, but Loya also thought of the true face of the fruit and its previous owner, the late Don Quixote Rossandi. The power of the fruit of silence. If it is this fruit, then the conversation between the two can indeed be relieved, and there is no need to worry about being known by outsiders. The more I come into contact with you, the more I admire you. Loya sincerely praised. In this world where scientific development is deformed, as a scientist, you must be under a lot of pressure. Who said it wasn't? Vegapunk scratched his fluffy hair and smiled helplessly. But even so, I'm also a scientist, and I should take the responsibility of a scientist. Responsibility. Loya snorted suddenly with disdain. Developing human weapons and exploring the taboo abyss. Is this the responsibility of scientists? What does science exist for? That is by no means a thing that exists to explore mysteries. From ancient times to the present, what can be called science has been born for the continuation of racial development. But now Vegapunk has put aside his big and right thoughts, and instead pursues deeper things without caring about the consequences he causes. This kind of responsibility, bah. For Loya's performance, Vegapunk was slightly lost, and then his eyes were full of enthusiasm. Mr. Loya is really clever, and he can see the essence of what I am doing at a glance. The birth of the pacifist and the discovery of the bloodline factor are all unfathomable knowledge in the eyes of others. Even the world government only thinks how useful this power can be, and has never thought about the more subtle things. But all along, only Vegapunk knows how dangerous and evil what he is doing. The design diagram of life seems to be able to make human beings have extremely powerful power, which is a very positive thing. But in fact, it is a forbidden abyss that should not be touched, a dangerous journey accompanied by despair and fear. Facing Loya, you can see the essence of the matter at a glance, and Vegapunk feels that this gamble is right. However, seeing Loya's unkind eyes, Vegapunk knew that he still needed to explain. Looking around cautiously, Vegapunk quietly rolled up his sleeves, then put them down immediately. The exposed wrist flashed by, but it was enough for Loya to see clearly. What's that? Roha asked in surprise. At the wrist of Vegapunk, a black rune exuding a terrifying aura was clinging to his skin. Even today's Roha, he felt a little bit from the rune. An indescribable threat. A means of controlling me, and a last insurance. Vegapunk said haggardly, you know what? I used to think that the design of life was a great discovery. Through the bloodline factor, human beings can have powerful powers from birth. Later you were arrested by the world government, and actually turned to work for the world government. I know all this. Loya waved his hand, not interested in listening to him talk about these old almanacs. Watching a lot of movies, you don't have to think about what Vegapunk went through. With that dangerous rune in his body, all words are actually unnecessary. Once, told Loya that Vegapunk has now changed his mind. He had learned the terrible consequences of touching the taboo, and tried to resist further research, but it was clear that he was imprisoned. The world government forces him to conduct dangerous and taboo research in an attempt to build a terrifying army that has always been enough to destroy the world. The birth of the pacifist is a result of this, including artificial devil fruits, including various devil fruit items. So, what do you have to do with me? Or, what can I help you with? Being short-handed and soft-hearted, Vegapunk's research materials have really helped Loya, and this causal Loya must be repaid. Just like those ungrateful and unfamiliar Byakugan wolves, that's how Loya is. Since Mr. Loya knows so much, then I'll get straight to the point. Vegapunk took out a sealed envelope from his arms and handed it to Loya. After years of hard work, I finally found some clues about this rune. Take this and go to Shirito Island, Baldy brother, someone there will tell you what to do. Baldy go. Open black lens bracket silence close black lens bracket the headquarters of the army. In this regard, Loya smiled. Don't you know the friction between me and them? But you should have a deeper intention. Vegapunk stared at Loya calmly. Obviously it was a question, but the words he said were so firm and unusual. Loya narrowed his eyes slightly, and sighed in a strange tone. Sure enough, the cadre of the silenced army, Bao Kun, Shang is willing to accept the transformation of the pacifists, and even be wiped out of thinking. There is indeed a reason for Vegapunk in it. The original work of Guanji can also find that the relationship between Vegapunk and the Silencer army is not so simple. Straw Hat, Luffy, as a wanted criminal on the world government's key arrest list, and the chief scientist of the scientific unit of the dignified naval headquarters, Vegapunk has no reason to agree to the bear's last request to protect the Sunny until they return. The world government and pirates are always at odds. The prototype of the bear has not been returned for 2 years. It is impossible for them not to find the tricks in it. However, the reality is like this: the Sunny still spent those 2 years safely, until Frankie returned to the Sunny, and then returned to the Navy headquarters. Vegapunk's role in this is much larger than the one in the original book. And its connection with the Silencer army is enough to explain the reason for this risky move. In order to prevent the continuation of the research, Vegapunk is also considered to be doing his best. Chapter 489-5 Old Star's Invitation. The time has dragged on for too long. If this goes on like this, even without me, they will be able to follow the data and study on their own. There was indescribable sadness in Vegapunk's tone. You know what? In fact, I was able to create a pacifist a few years ago, but it wasn't until this year that the first-generation test product was officially released. The presence of the bear has dragged me out for years. He's a hero. A few years ago, when Loya was still a lieutenant general in the Navy, he quietly deployed his own forces. At that time, when Shang came to the Navy headquarters and agreed to join the pacifist research sequence, and by the way flew Loya to Crisvia, he thought that the pacifist plan had just started. But he never thought that Vegapunk could actually create that kind of mechanical army long ago. Why is the bear a hero? Obviously, Vegapunk has been able to create pacifists, but Shang volunteered to give Vegapunk an excuse to delay the time, and it seems that he is conducting research from scratch. Since ancient times, the so-called righteous people are just like bears, quietly paying guys. Last question. The time of each chat should not be too long, because the working time of the box is limited. And talking to a few more people can also confuse people. So everyone hurry up and end the conversation in a few minutes. The blonde man over there has finished talking with Mahak, and is now watching the two from a distance. Loya had a hunch that he was about to come into contact with something that he couldn't understand from the original book. Why me? Loya asked this question very seriously, but also very indifferently. He doesn't believe in the argument that the destiny of the chosen son is in charge, and the same is true of Vegapunk, who believes in science. Since he can be chosen among the people present, it is obvious that there must be some details that Loya does not know. I tested your blood. Vegapunk had already stood up, because a member of the 5 Old Stars, the blonde man was walking slowly, the box under the two of them, the indicator light was also quickly extinguished. You are different from us. At this point, the box under his feet made a dee-dee alarm sound, and then stopped working. The blonde man's footsteps were just right, not a minute earlier, not a second later, standing beside Loya. Interested in chatting, Mr. Ice Dragon, Loya. Vegapunk's next target is a bland young man who looks like a little kid who follows an adult to meet the world, but the trajectory and momentum displayed by the other party's gestures let Loya know that this person is not simple. After a few words of conversation, he also took the envelope that Vegapunk handed over, thinking that Vegapunk was already prepared for this. The small box that can temporarily use the ability of the Fruit of Silence can only prevent others from hearing the content of the conversation, but it cannot make people completely invisible. The actions he just handed over to Loya's envelope must have fallen into the eyes of the 5 Old Stars. In order to avoid information leakage, Vegapunk prepared a false deck. However, the next thing over there has nothing to do with Loya. Now he has to face the troubled 5 Old Star in front of him, the blonde old man who calls himself Osman. 5 Old Stars. 5 Old Stars. In fact, not all of them are elderly people. For example, the golden retriever in a dark yuhi-colored suit, with a faint scar on his chest, can only be considered to be about to enter old age at best. Perhaps because of Oda's relationship, Ottoman has distinct Western characteristics, thick body hair and pungent body odor. You can understand these as male charm, or you can regard them as barbarians. But in any case, Osman is indeed not as old as the other 5 old stars. Why is the focus here? Because listening to the other party keep listing evidence and telling himself how great they are and how much they have contributed, Loya is already tired, and can only divert his attention by observing these. Glancing at the indicator lights on the box, the 4 green ones have changed to 3 yuhi. Loya felt that he had to interrupt, so he raised his hand. It's almost time, Mr. Osman. I think we'd better get to the point. Hey, it seems that you still haven't grasped the value and meaning of the existence of the world government. Osman sighed slightly, took a sip from his teacup. This time, Loya's invitation to come is indeed beyond their expectations, but it is not a bad thing. If you can take this opportunity to draw Loya over, you will not only have fewer enemies in the future, but also become a powerful fighting force for yourself. Then, his expression suddenly became serious, and he looked at Loya seriously. The Antonio family has won, Mr. Loya. He did not live up to his seriousness, and in a word, all of Loya's mind was attracted. This time the Antonio family entered the power center, and the 5 old stars were safe and sound. Loya thought it was the result of mutual compromise between the 2 sides, but Osman's words overturned Loya's guess. The 5 old stars, an organization that seized power from the Antonio family 200 years ago. If such a thing can be done in the hands of the Antonio family, who can be said to have established the world government with one hand, it must not be a single family. It can be said that the 5 old stars represent the 5 collective interests. Only when the 5 families join forces can they compete with the terrifying first family and maintain their dominance. These are what Osman told Roya, and he wanted Roya to understand what a difficult situation he and others were facing at the moment. Then why are you still alive? Are you capable of holding this tea party? How bloody the power struggle is, I am afraid that even a fool will understand. However, at this moment Osman told Loya that they had lost, and now they are standing here intact, and Loya felt that his IQ was insulted. They have the trump card to overturn everything, but we also have the trump card to destroy everything. Unless absolutely necessary, neither side will do that. Osman did not explain much on this issue. After all, whether Loya was an enemy or a friend could not be confirmed. With that said, Loya understands that it is still a compromise after all. In this fight, it was clear that the Antonio family had the upper hand. It's just that both sides have not shown enough cards, and the Antonio family does not dare to press too hard. This tea party, we have only one purpose. Osman said, to win over all who can be attracted, and to regain our dominion. The invitation letter in your hand should have been given to you by the Antonio family. Loya's strength is obvious to all, and his existence itself is a heavy trump card. So it is not surprising that Osman made this judgment. After all, the Antonio family also has the same purpose for Loya. If it weren't for the fact that the pirates such as Whitebeard had too rigid a relationship with them, and the ideas of pirates such as Whitebeard were too contrary to them, I believe it would not be surprising even if the 4 emperors Roja appeared here. Silence, forget the army. If Drago dares to come, even if the tea conversation will be wiped out, both parties must kill him at all costs. Loya did not answer, but Osman continued. Dragon people have always been the privileged class of the world, even we dare not touch it easily. This is the confidence brought to them by the Antonio family. But presumably Mr. Loya also know what kind of maggots they are as world nobles. As the 5 old stars, the top leader of the world government, Osman didn't care to call the world nobles maggots in front of Loya. Just the leakage of this sentence may cause a series of conflicts. Series of battles. It is precisely because the stakes are high that the existence of the tea party is kept completely secret. Even if Loya made such a big noise in Mary Joa, it will not leak to the outside world in the future. In fact, there is not much entanglement between you and us. Whether it is historical text or the pinnacle of power, you are not interested in Mr. Loya. But we have the same goal, the same direction of struggle. Peace and the Tianlong people are an obstacle to peace. At this point, Loya already understood what he wanted to say. The consequences of his own ice dragon's flapping wings seemed to be far more terrifying than he thought. Chapter 490 Immortal. Why do Tianlong people enjoy so many privileges, and why even the 5 old stars have to let them go? There is only one reason, because they can't afford it. As a person in power, with such a group of unruly lords in their hands who do things all day long, the grievances in Wu Laoxing's heart can be imagined. Descendants of the Creator. Descendants of God. Just kidding, rulers don't have that much awe. As long as the strength is enough, even if the true God comes, they will try to kill the God and wipe out all the existences that threaten their dominance. However, the fact now is that the Tianlong people are still alive. Jump around. So the 5 old stars had to find a balance among them, restricting the Tianlong people without arousing their resistance. Without my presence, this balance will remain for a long time. Should not be too long. Straw Hat, Luffy is already the designated One Piece. No need to mention it again. If the era develops according to the original work, the muddy waters of the world government will be chaotic within a few years. At this moment, Loya has appeared, and he has not shown much enthusiasm for the historical text and the overthrow of the world government. This allows both sides to see expectations, a hope that completely destroys the other side. In all fairness, Ottoman's statement is very much to Loya's taste. This world is inherently deformed and backward, the 4 seas are almost isolated from the great shipping routes, and the countless dotted islands form their own lines, living ignorantly and fearlessly. The chaos is not caused by them alone. On the contrary, the words, world government, have more positive meanings than those existing stains. In this world, the existence that can be called the source of evil is undoubtedly the group of Tianlong people. Destroying the Tianlong people is a matter of great benefit and no harm to Loya, Wu Laoxing, and the entire world. Is there anything wrong with rulers wanting to maintain their rule? Are they really stupid enough to not understand the current situation? Love seeing challengers yelling, freedom, trying to overthrow their own domination. Whether it is slavery or gold in the sky, it seems that the world government is in charge, but the root of all this actually comes from the Tianlong people. Osman's offer was tempting, and the reward he gave was rich enough. As long as they follow their plan, Loya will gain the absolute power under the 5 old stars after it is done. It's not that they are bold, but that they understand that Loya is really not interested in things like ruling the world. With or without him, it doesn't really matter. However, in the face of this generous invitation, Loya still did not speak, just played a listener. When the time was about to end, Osman continued to repeat, Tianlong people are the source of the calamity. Mr. Loya can see it clearly with his own eyes. Before the situation becomes irreversible, I hope Mr. Loya can see clearly. The world, make a decision. Quote. It's understandable that you can't directly invite Loya to join your own faction. Wouldn't it be funny if you could make a decision with just a few words on such an important matter? These efforts made by Osman are actually just to give Loya an insurance. It was the Antonio family who invited him, and the Antonio family was a member of the Tianlong people. As long as Loya's views on the Draconians remain the same, then Osman has achieved his goal. Then, Osman got up and left, retreating his position. Because behind him, a thin man came over, waiting to communicate with Loya. Even if he hadn't seen the badge on his chest, Loya had heard it more than once at this tea party. That's the coat of arms of the Antonio family. It feels good to have strength, Mr. Loya. As the patriarch of the first family, Carlo was not as domineering as ordinary people imagined. His tone was soothing, and he was more like an elegant scholar sitting there than a powerful master coon. Even aside from the illustrious cloak of the Antonio family patriarch, this man is still an eye-catching guy. On him, there is a kind of confidence and demeanor that Roja has never seen before. He has a fierce tiger in his heart and sniffs roses carefully. This sentence is put on him with a rotten description, without the slightest incongruity. Ottoman's attitude towards outsiders has never been so kind. What kind of 5 old stars is Loya has already known Akatsuki through the original work. Even if Carlo doesn't say it, Loya knows it clearly. In this world where strength is paramount, fists are the foundation that determines the right to speak. It is because of his unrivaled strength that Osman is so calm, seeing him as a character who can be treated equally. If standing here today as a so-called Dark World Lord Kun, the so-called leader of the Alliance countries, I am afraid that the 5 old stars will start to threaten without saying a word. What he said just now doesn't need me to repeat it to you, Mr. Caro. Loya raised the teacup and turned away the sweetness after eating the snack. What about you? Do the same thing as him. No, that's not necessary. To Loya's expectations, Carlo did not win him over as he imagined. We have already won, and as long as we give us a few more years, the 3 words, 5 old stars, will exist in name only. Now that they have curled up and have to rely on this kind of tea party to gather strength, the Antonio family naturally has a better confidence. Just like when they failed to resist more than 10 years ago, the situation was frozen together. Now, they are just doing what the 5 old stars did at that time. Carlo's words are full of confidence, showing a strong self-confidence. Only he, as the contemporary patriarch of the Antonio family, has the confidence to say such a thing. So, what's the purpose of the invitations you sent me? Loya asked curiously, not wanting to win over him. So what was the purpose of them inviting him? Is it fun? Does Mr. Loya ever know how we lost our power 200 years ago? Carlo spoke lightly and threw a scary question. There are very few insiders of this secret, and what Zepha told Loya is just an outline. He also learned some through his own channels, but it is not detailed enough. Hearing this, Loya frowned. I would like to hear the details. After taking a sip of water, Carlo said slowly, not every generation of the Antonio family is as capable as I am. With the continuation of the family, there will always be such an incompetent descendant. The one from 200 years ago was like this, but before him, the ancestor of the previous generation was a great King Kun. 200 years ago, when the world government was still under the rule of the Antonio family, the era of the great pirates was far away, and the world was more backward than it is now, but more peaceful. Except for the eternal taboo and the blank 100 years, the world at that time was not much quieter than this turbulent and noisy era. Even if there are pirates, it is a normal phenomenon born of the geographical environment of the vast island of Xinglo. Under the rule of that ancestor, the world government flourished and stabilized its rule, and at the same time it was also earnestly doing the work of protecting the people. The most important thing is that the gold system in the sky at that time was not as complicated as it was later, but it was a kind of tribute accompanied by respect. Wise Lord. That's what they called him at the time. However, for such an ancestor, there is a son under his knees who uses the 3 words, impossible, to describe them as an insult to these 3 words. What is even more frightening is that, according to the rules handed down from ancient times, when he passes away, the power of the world government will fall on this waste son. You can imagine what the world will be like then. Able to be called the wise Lord, it is impossible for this person to fail to see the future outcome. So, this man made a bold decision. He wants to live forever. Chapter 491 It happened. For a reason. 3 more please subscribe. Immortality is an interesting topic. Since ancient times, the overlords of countless Kun kings have hoped that their rights will continue to exist forever, but what often makes them unhappy is not from the rule, but from themselves. It is said that people have longevity in life. When they are weak and seriously ill in old age, how much they hope that they can live forever. But unlike King Kun who just wants to hold power, this one has a much simpler mind. Because of the illness, he has long lost his fertility, and only this one son is left. When he falls and he succeeds, what will the world be like? In order to prevent the world from falling into turmoil, this person pursued longevity in his later years, and wanted to continue to stay at the pinnacle of this power until the next generation of talent appeared in the family. Then, he failed, and must fail. There is only one emperor's position, and there are more than 10 million people who peep at this position. At that time, the 5 old stars were not called 5 old stars, they were just a group of high-level world government leaders who had walked very close. People have ambitions, and the more powerful they are, the more unwilling they are to be subordinated to others. To be able to reach that realm under the rule of the wise lord, aside from their abilities, their ambitions are naturally not small. So, in the face of the situation at the time, they saw expectations. Can't let him live. The trash must succeed. After all kinds of calculations and all kinds of obstructions, everyone must know the result later. The wise master dies, and the waste son succeeds. The first thing this man did when he took office was to increase the share of gold in the sky, because he believed that he and others were descendants of the Creator, and everything in this world belonged to them. The wine is theirs, the treasure is theirs, even the world is theirs. As a result, the harsh system of heavenly gold that later caused countless allied countries to suffer came into being. The new king succeeds to the throne, selects virtuous people and appoints talents, and secures the country and benefits the people. Non-existent. That is the standard example of a Tianlong person, who does everything extravagant and enjoys his life. Later, the 5 old stars, in accordance with this tyranny, carried the name of overthrowing the violent Kun, and attracted countless martyrs to gather and stand at the highest peak of power. The failure 200 years ago has become history. Now that the Antonio family has me and Scylla, it is impossible to repeat the same mistakes, and such a situation will happen again. Even though he had never seen the legendary Master of Wiseness, Loya saw a shadow on Carlo in front of him in a trance. It was the same confidence, the same self-respect. So, we invite your excellency for only one purpose. Carlo looked at Loya's eyes solemnly. In order to avoid repeating the same mistakes, I have to fulfill the unfulfilled wishes of my ancestors. In this world, it is enough to have me. Ancestors will. Luoya suddenly shrank his pupils and met his eyes seriously. Do you want to live forever? Carlo can repress the 5 old stars in a situation that is 200 years behind. There is no doubt about his temperament and skills. So he had the same idea as the wise lord, and wanted to live forever. This absolutely terrible confidence. Since the descendants are unworthy, then he who has proved himself will maintain this rule. What about Millennium Eternal? As long as he is there, Antonio will always be that Antonio. Suddenly, the communication between the two suddenly stopped. They stared blankly at the surprised Loya, not understanding what Carlo said. That was the ice dragon, Loya, who made the whole world mute with his fists. What kind of important thing was it that made him look so at a loss? But soon, Loya calmed down the shock in his heart, and his expression calmed down again. So you want to live forever, but the failure of the Athos family tells you that this is out of reach, so you found me and want to transform yourself into an undead. In an instant, a series of events that happened over the years formed a line in Loya's mind. As early as the first time he knew the 3 words, Athos, all this was a game played by Antonio. Hansa, Tony, and him are just pawns in this chess game, and even the Navy, the world government, and the whole world are all under Antonio Caro's play. Vegapunk was arrested for a design of life, in which the ambitious patriarch of the Antonio family must also be operating. All seemingly unrelated events ended up pointing in the same direction. Suddenly, Carlo shook his head and denied Loya's idea. Although the undead don't have to worry about the passage of time, they will be controlled by you. If it is not inevitable, I will not consider this method. The last paragraph of Loya is just a joke. If Carlo really accepts the transformation, it will be a big joke. After a pause, Carlo continued, before that, I flipped through the records and found another way to live forever. A way that was born 200 years ago and disappeared into the long river of history. Born 200 years ago. Luoya suddenly remembered his few memories, and a smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. What did you say, but pure gold? Pure gold, a miracle born of parental love. The treasures that have appeared in the world of One Piece are so complicated, but what impresses Loya the most is undoubtedly the pure gold. Perhaps it was because of the history of his own country that he had been exposed to since childhood. When he first heard the effect of pure gold, Loya became very interested in this thing. That is a treasure that can delay the growth of the human body indefinitely. Indeed, it does not allow people to have eternal life directly, it just delays its arrival, and no matter how delayed it is, there is a time limit. But compared with the lifespan of human beings, this delayed period is not much different from eternity. The little girl Olga and her father, Ozzy, who wore a pure gold ring, were still alive and kicking after more than 200 years. It was as if time had stopped, and there was not a trace of passage in them. Pure gold, that's one of them. Carlo was not surprised at why Loya knew so much. The legend of pure gold is still circulating in the sea until now. Eloha's current status wants to know Akatsuki's news is still lighthearted. But in the eyes of most people now, this is just a joke and legend circulating in the sea. After all, if it is really as magical as the legend, why can't the world government and Tianlong people come out to find it? The world most wants and is most likely to be immortal, who else is there other than their peak power? Since they didn't pay attention to this matter, the corresponding pure gold legend must be just a story. However, Carlo's simple answer is to characterize the legend and tell the world that pure gold really exists. Not caring how much waves his words would cause, Carlo took a sip of tea. The other direction is that, ageless surgery, of the fruit of surgery. Chapter 492 Provocative. Ageless surgery. The ultimate power of the surgical fruit. Although there are various restrictions on the conditions of use, there is no doubt that this is also a way to achieve the dream of mankind since ancient times. Moreover, compared with the pure gold that needs to be worn everywhere, the longevity granted by the fruit of the operation is also safer, and there will be no accidents. Hearing the name of this fruit, a smile appeared on the corner of Loya's mouth. Trafalgar Luo. Mr. Loya really knows everything. There was a hint of unease hidden on Carlo's face, but he was quickly hidden by him. If it wasn't for Roja's amazing eyesight, I'm afraid he would have been deceived by this old fox. If I can, whether it's Luo or pure gold, I want to get these. After calming down his emotions, Carlo showed his ambitions as a matter of course. After all, he has already won this competition, and the situation has been set. I am the only one who is immortal. Of course, in order to avoid accidents, the air I have carefully cultivated, it is best to be the same. Whether it is strength, ambition, wisdom or means, Scylla's performance is very satisfactory to Carlo, and it is not in vain that he invests it in the Navy and CP0 since he was a child to exercise his various abilities. It's not scary to have ambition, the Antonio family needs the most ambitious. As long as you are alive, no matter how big your ambition is, it can only be ambition, a rotten ambition in your stomach. Luo still needs time to settle, and now he doesn't have enough talent and ability to perform ageless surgery. Carlo continued, but before that, pure gold has a little clue. Speaking of this, Carlo looked at Loya, cleaning up the illegal actions of the Tianlong people and rectifying the chaotic order of the sea. As long as Mr. Loya agrees, these are not problems. The chips are so big. The golden vertical pupil shrank suddenly and turned into a thin line. Loya held the teacup, a little surprised at the price the Antonio family was willing to pay. That is the descendant of the creator like them, the Tianlong people of the world's nobles. In order to maintain their own rule, they are willing to attack their compatriots. After a pause, Loya said casually, if I say, I want to know the blank 100 years of history. This is the bottom line of the world government, a fuse enough to detonate this world. Loya doesn't really care about this, but he can take this opportunity to test the bottom line of the Antonio family. Blank centennial history, of course. Unexpectedly, Carlo gave a positive answer directly and decisively without any hesitation. Aren't you afraid that I will overthrow you? If it were you, I believe that after knowing the truth, I would only be more willing to help us. The confidence on Carlo's face came from nowhere, but his expression didn't seem to be fake. Of course, I didn't want to do that, and the rules of the family don't allow me to disclose it to outsiders. It's just that if the object is you, then everything doesn't matter. You. Just as he was about to say something, all of a sudden there was a commotion around him. Loya looked down and saw that the box under the two of them had stopped working. This noise is just an illusion caused by the sudden penetration of external sounds after a long period of silence after the box has failed. In fact, if you listen carefully, you will find that this is the humming that many people have lowered their voices. If there is a chance, I hope Mr. Loya can give me an answer. Carlo raised his glass to Loya, and then walked quickly to Shinluo. There, Shinluo was talking to a thin old man who looked old-fashioned. When Carlo came over, the two immediately shut up. The Antonio family is not at peace either. Loya sighed, not knowing where this melancholy came from. Clap clap. Clap his hands. Osman stood in the master's seat, and raised his glass to the rest. I'm sorry everyone, our tools can only work for so long. If you have anything else to say, you can do it now. Bring it up. Loya turned to look at Vegapunk, but found that the other party nodded helplessly. It's no wonder that such useful props are not deployed on a large scale among Cypher Pole and the Navy. It turns out that their working hours are still so limited. Not to mention that it is used to infiltrate and eavesdrop on secrets. It is difficult to play any substantive role even for the duration of shit. But for the 5 old stars, such a flaw is just right. No matter who will speak next, they can more or less guess the content of the conversation. This was the case in the past tea parties. Through the following conversation, we roughly figured out the content of other people's transactions, and then made targeted layouts. The tea party is just a platform, and the real game has just begun from this moment. It's just that they were destined to be disappointed today, because the first person to stand up was the unreliable Vice Admiral, Iron Fist, Garp. They had just talked with the swordsman from the 5 old stars and the representative of the Tianlong family, Mephisto Middle, but looking at the faces of the two, the ending must be very unhappy. At this moment, there was also a trace of anger in Karp's words, and he aimed the gun directly at Loya. Loya. Tell me what you want to do. You actually attack yourself as soon as you come up. This situation caught Loya by surprise. But what is very interesting is that, whether it is Antonio or the 5 old stars, whether it is the unidentified powerhouses or the representatives of the Tianlong people, when they hear this question, they all focus on him. How does it feel to be powerful? Loya couldn't help thinking of Carlo's opening remarks and understood why he received so much attention. Excluding the tricks between Antonio and the 5 old stars, the forces on the sea today can be divided into 3 types. One is the Navy and the world government, and the other is pirates and Shichibukai. These two are hostile forces that have never changed in this world for 800 years. Even if the Shichibukai appeared decades ago, it was actually attributed to the pirates' camp. And the third-party forces other than these two are undoubtedly the current Loya. This terrifying monster that defeated Ulysses, destroyed the naval headquarters, and occupied the entrance to the New World. However, the problem is that, as a pinnacle figure who can now be on an equal footing with the other two sides, his thoughts have never been clarified. He killed the pirates who were incompatible with the Navy, and also killed the Tianlong people of the world government. He could allow Monet and other officials of the Don Quixote family to live, and he did not want to be an enemy of the Navy. It seems that what he has done is full of madness and tyranny, but everyone can see that Loya is not officially hostile to any party now, wandering on the edge of all forces, quite a bit of both sides. However, will Loya be a guy who keeps his neutrality and protects himself? The question is naturally negative. So, what exactly is Loya going to do has become the most concerned issue for everyone. Looking at Garp, who was arrogant in front of him, Loya twitched the corners of his mouth, revealing a slightly mocking smile. What I want, of course, is world peace. World peace. In the small sky garden, Loya's words can be clearly transmitted to the ears of everyone present. However, this answer attracted a burst of laughter. Ha 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 ha, what the hell are you talking about? Peace. Isn't this world always peaceful? The man who spoke was a bearded man, and his burly body told others that this man possessed unmatched force. It's ridiculous to have a pirate template, but at the moment, wearing a suit and wearing a monkey crown. He stared at Loya sternly, and snorted disdainfully in his nostrils. It's you, but now it's the biggest obstacle to world peace. Oh. You can never wake up a person who is pretending to be asleep. Hearing the other party's words, Loya raised his hand silently, and the ice blue dragon slayer magic power surrounded his arms, flying up and down. What did you just say? I didn't catch. Chapter 493 Abandoned Allies. Open your eyes and talk nonsense. This is probably the ability of all the people present. The bearded man looked carefree, but in one sentence he transferred the firepower to Loya. Peace. There will be no peace in this world one day. The benevolent sees the benevolent and the wise sees the wisdom, and anyone who can stand here knows its meaning. But is Loya an obstacle to peace? Absolutely not. It's just that Loya is blocking the way they want to go further, and it is an obstacle for these vested interests. However, anyone has to pay the price for their behavior and wants to test themselves, then it depends on whether the person has enough cards. Seeing Loya's posture, the bearded man seemed to be very excited. Instead of retreating, he stepped forward and stepped out of the crowd. Look at what you are doing now. The former vice admiral defected from the navy and killed the world governments. Chihuahai, occupying the sea area at the entrance of the new world. Do you still consider yourself a righteous partner? Justice is always neutral. It will not be represented by any force, and there is never a partner to speak of. Suddenly, Roja put away the power on his body, and the cloak inspired by magic power was attached to his back again. He looked at the bearded man with interest and asked, "Since you are talking about peace with me, who are you?" Doing it, Loya is not afraid, and the bearded must be ready to die here. However, once he started, Loya broke the rules of the tea party, which gave him no reason to cooperate with those who had talked before. The other party's purpose is clear at a glance. He wants to use his life to prevent Loya from interfering in these things. Since you plan to do so, I still don't want to go your way. Me. The bearded man was stunned, not understanding why Loya, who was already on the verge of eruption, showed such an expression, but he quickly calmed down and continued to say arrogantly with his chin raised, I am one of the countries that joined the world government, King of Steel Nation, Michelson. A member state of the world government, are used very cleverly. Because whether it is Antonio or the 5 old stars, it is the world government itself who wants to discuss cooperation with Loya. As the saying goes, it depends on the owner of the dog, and the bearded Loya, who is betting on tyranny, will not care about this. Dog owners, shoot directly at yourself. As everyone knows, Loya smiled slightly and did not answer his statement. He turned his head and asked a question in the direction of the 5 old stars and the Antonio family. Michelson, in the world government, is there a country? All of a sudden, the bearded man felt a chill in his heart, a kind of miscalculated chill in his heart. He followed the line of sight to the 5 old stars and laughed loudly. Your question is ridiculous. The Michelson kingdom has joined the world government for hundreds of years. It is the most loyal supporter of the world government. Quote. No. Antonio Carlo said indifferently, and then asked Osman next to him, do you remember him in the franchise? Regarding this question, the Ottomans were calm and silent. After a long time, Osman put down his hands on his chest and shrugged. I'm sorry, I haven't heard of it. Come on, just kidding, you. The bearded man's eyes widened, looking at the top officials of the world government in disbelief. Even if Loya has reached a deal with them, this shouldn't be the case, right? Why can such an understatement abandon an allied country? To be able to appear here, don't these people understand his status and power in the alliance countries? Not only him, hearing the answers of the 5 old stars and Antonio Carlo, the others exclaimed in low voices, and there were many discussions about this answer. However, when a line of sight swept over, the discussion disappeared instantly, and no one dared to look at Loya at the moment. Clap clap clap. Loya clapped his hands and moved his wrists by the way. So, since you are not a member of the world government, what qualifications do you have to discuss peace in front of me? The overwhelming terrifying dragons might appeared instantly, crushing cracks on the surrounding table stones. The magic was re-entangled in his hands, and Loya smiled at him. So now, are you ready to die? The illegal trespasser. You. Before he finished speaking, he heard a loud bang, and the entire sky garden trembled twice. But the person who did it was not Loya. He looked at the smoky area and silently closed his fist. Well done, Lieutenant General Carp. Kneeling down on one knee, Garp kept his right hand straight. His wrinkled face was already ashen. Hearing this sentence, Carp bit Kiba and said, "This old man is a navy, so naturally he won't let any criminals go." Under his right hand, the bearded man was smashed into the slate by Garp's iron fist, and he opened his mouth and lost consciousness. And as the lady masquerade Tiana who invited the bearded to the tea party, the expression on her face at the moment was no better than Carp. 5 old stars. Carlo. Tiana whispered these two names hatefully. She never thought that Loya was so important to them. She would rather abandoning a strong allied country also ensures that cooperation continues. Shame. It's a shame to live Yuhi Guago. And this matter also tells her that in the face of real interests, these guys can abandon everything they think is important, cruel, but realistic. Tiana's face was blue and white, constantly changing, and she was obviously in extreme struggle. At this moment, Osman glanced at Tiana in the crowd, and said calmly, "Michelson Kingdom. That country is rich in iron ore, and it seems that it needs to be taken back." The meaning of this sentence is self-evident. The Michelson Kingdom can be said to have ceased to exist from today. What awaits there will be a purge from the world government until it is completely reduced to a mine. And for Tiana, who secretly controls the kingdom, this sentence is to cut off one of her arms. The bearded man is already an abandoned child, and now he opens his mouth to cause trouble. Tiana hesitated again and again, and finally had to say goodbye to the 5 old stars with a livid face. Someone takes the lead, and naturally someone follows suit. This time the tea party has exposed enough things, and it is meaningless to stay here. Everyone has different thoughts and is unwilling to stay here. As a result, this grand tea party of unprecedented scale ended hastily when a king was imprisoned. Leaving the hanging garden, Loya prepares to fly back to Turtle Island and let Jones start looking for the giant lanternfish that swallowed pure gold. Although I don't like pure gold, it is undoubtedly a trump card to have the master in my hand and use it well. Even with peak-level power, he has never underestimated the powerhouses in this world. However, what this tea party revealed was undoubtedly far beyond his imagination. Facts have proved that Simon's plan is still somewhat useful. They have already made plans to become enemies with the world government, so it is naturally necessary to find out the strength and plans of the other party. That's why Loya made such a strong debut, just to let the hidden powerhouse in Mary Joary take action, so as to find out the information. In the whole of Mary Joa, the presence of Aokiji and the others alone can be counted in double digits. In addition, there is a large group of flying squirrel-like capable generals, densely packed like a swarm of insects. The Holy Land deserves to be an existence that stands on the top of the sea for 800 years. This background is terrifying and suffocating. It's no wonder that Teacher Zepha has been warning me that the world government has the power to sweep everything. It turns out that the problem is here. Loya frowned and thought, feeling that he needed to change his plan and rearrange his forces. At this moment, a huge iron ball the size of a warship was thrown from the sea below. Under the terrible acceleration, the huge body is no longer the sound of the wind, but the actual wind pressure. Before he got close, Loya had a feeling of being pushed to the side. Cap. Swinging such a huge iron ball as a weapon, Roa can't think of anyone other than Carp. There was a fanatical fighting intent on his face, his body swelled suddenly, and the whole person was wrapped in sturdy dragon scales. Boom. Blue and black domineering wrapped around his fist, Loya swung his shoulders, and at the critical moment, a punch hit the huge iron ball. Bang. The dull crashing sound resounded through the sea, and even the Holy Land Marijoa, which was far away, could hear it clearly. Chapter 494 Navy Siege. On the sea below, the cloak and coat that were in the way were taken off, and the old man in only a blue-gray shirt stood on a raised reef beach. His muscles were tucked all over his body, his back was swollen, he stared at a pair of tiger-like eyes, and raised his head to meet Loya's war-filled gaze. Taking a deep breath, Garp roared up to the sky. Loya! The sound reverberated in the sea, stirring up a circle of waves, which slapped violently around. There will definitely be someone doing it themselves. This is something that Loya has already realized, otherwise he would not keep the flight altitude at a low altitude of only tens of meters above the sea, just to lure those people to take action and then clean it up. Just like the big beard that jumped out before, Loya's existence has actually touched too many things. Whether it is the negotiation with Osman or the communication with the Antonio family, it is enough for him to be regarded as a thorn in the side of the various forces. Is he an obstacle to peace? In a sense, it is. As long as they win, Loya, the enemy, is naturally an obstacle to peace. But Loya didn't expect that the first person to do it would be Garp. Lieutenant General Garp, you don't really think I dare not kill you? The iron ball was smashed into a big pit under Loya's strange force. The pit was stacked layer upon layer, and the hard iron block turned into a soft dough at this moment, with pleats. Some lines could not bear the terrible tension, and a trace of crack appeared on it. Boom! The huge iron ball fell into the sea, and the waves were tens of meters high. The sun shines on the sea, and a Madara rainbow bridge is built between the two. The seawater crackled on his face. Garp didn't move at all. He silently pulled the chain back, then turned around, twisted his waist, and threw the iron ball towards Loya again. The power this time is even more terrifying than before. Even if a large sea king is hit, it will instantly turn into a puddle of meat. Such a terrifying power, Roha has only seen it in Gai Duo. When he was young, he was able to push One Piece Roger into a desperate situation several times. When he was older, he could also suppress him head-on when Guy was provocative. Garp's strength is undoubtedly strong. The kind that is so strong that the world changes color. Facing the iron ball that came with the aura of destruction, Loya did not hold back. The magic power on his body stirred again, and his head had already turned into a ferocious dragon head like a giant dragon. Awakening Dragon King Shikai. Ha! Gently exhaling a mouthful of turbid air, the steel-like muscles bulged out, slowly compressing and accumulating force like a spring. Then, Six Kings Absolute Spear Chongfang. Boom, boom. The terrifying storm swept across the world. The huge iron ball collided with Loyana's seemingly small fist, and it burst open. The endless gust of wind spread turbulently with Loya as the center, and the sea under my feet was pressed down by this wind pressure to a depth of several meters. From a distance, it seems that the sea water here has been gouged into a big bowl. The solid iron ball the size of a warship could no longer withstand the power of the two fighting, and it turned into bits and pieces and fell from the sky. Smashing the iron ball, Loya did not relax. Because neither he nor Garp knew that the battle had just begun. Suddenly, a figure appeared behind Loya, and Garp's fist was wrapped in a powerful domineering, and even the atmosphere was trembling. Luo Ya's pupils shrank and said in surprise, "Second stage acceleration." With the convenience of dragon-slaying magic and the resilience that surpasses ordinary people, Roha himself is a user of the second stage acceleration, but he did not expect that Garp could do such a thing with his fleshly body alone. The speed advantage seems to be gone for a while. Thinking of this, Loya twisted his body without hesitation, and the wide dragon wings on his back cut out like a razor. The dragon wings wrapped in magic and domineering are extremely hard and extremely sharp. Even steel can be easily cut, but it cannot cut the domineering entanglement around Garp's fist. Ding! Bright fire burst out in the air, and the two suddenly separated a distance due to the vibration of the fight. With a miss, Garp accelerated again in the second stage, stepping on the moon step and shaving and rushing towards Loya. The trace of blood left on the fist was left behind by the strong wind before it dripped, and a layer of orange UV's air film could be seen vaguely wrapped around Garp's hand. Garp's fist. The fist speed can actually ignite the air. Iron Fist Meteor Strike. In the face of this powerful attack, Roha raised his magic power, and was not afraid, and also greeted him with his fist. Ice Dragon's Frost Fist. Bang bang bang. Collapse. One punch after another, the strong collision changed the color of the world, whether it was the dark clouds above the head or the sea under the feet, they all shattered into slag in the hands of the two. Even the air could not capture the traces of the two of them. The terrifying speed and the collision of their fists made them flee from here far away, and they were reluctant to return for a long time. Loya's physical fitness is undoubtedly stronger than Garp. Even if the air in the center of the two fights is thin like outer space, he can punch without hesitation, and each punch is stronger than each punch. And Garp can't. The two were already fighting at high altitude. When the clash of fists squeezed the air to a limit, Garp suddenly felt a tightness in his chest, his breathing suddenly went wrong, and the movement of his hands slowed for a moment. It was this moment's flaw that Loya's fist could hit Garp one moment earlier. Bang! Like a shooting star, Garp flew upside down, and a trace of blood oozes out from the Kiba gate, which he clenched tightly, and a long line is drawn in the air. Rumbling. Obviously it was just a person who fell, but the sea below exploded a huge wave that was hundreds of meters high. Even if they are far apart, people can feel the powerful power that destroys the world. A few kilometers away from the center of the battle between the two was a small reef beach. At this moment, on this small reef, there is a splendid naval high-level lineup. Sengoku, Crane, Akainu, Kasaragi, Aokiji, the most powerful forces of the Navy headquarters have been dispatched to this small reef beach, and their purpose is self-evident. The tall waves crashed over, and the green pheasant took a step forward and squatted down on the edge of the reef beach. Then he stretched out his hand with a serious expression and put it into the sea water under his feet. Ice Age. Crack clap. The surging cold air continued to spread, and in just an instant, the waves up to 100 meters were frozen solid. This scene made the soldiers on the warship next to the reef beach breathe a sigh of relief, because they avoided the ending of being smashed to pieces by the waves. Sengoku frowned and commanded, "You all turn around and go back immediately, and don't come near here." Yes. After receiving the order, the accompanying school officer quickly ordered to lift the anchor and sail the ship. Before the warship left, he suddenly turned his head and asked, "Then Marshal Sengoku, when will we be back to pick you up?" Pick up? Pick up what? The body fragments are still our tombs." Kizaru pouted slyly and spit out in a low voice. No one answered him, because everyone present didn't know if they could come back alive. Seeing the silent naval leaders in front of him, the colonel took a deep breath and resolutely ordered the ship to sail. The fight stopped, and the air immediately poured back into the center of the battle. The gust of wind that blew backwards formed a uzumaki, and the extremely unstable airflow wanted to pull Loya into the sea. But facing Loya, their efforts were in vain. With a flutter of wings, Loya flew straight down. Boom! Falling on the waves, the sea instantly freezes and turns into a snow field. Loya raised his head and looked at Garp, who jumped out of the sea, his brows furrowed. "Why are you?" Garp. Chapter 495 Fight Garp. Cough cough. With fists clenched, Garp stood proudly on the ice. He coughed up the seawater that had choked into his lungs, and wiped a trace of blood from the corner of his mouth. With a trace of nostalgia in his eyes, he looked at the familiar and unfamiliar man in front of him. "Why, don't you understand this question? Go back, Loya. Go back." Loya sneered and folded his hands on his chest. "What are you going back? Go back and continue to slaughter civilians. Go back and continue to bow down. Go back and let those pigs and dragons do whatever they want. You still don't understand, Lieutenant General Garp." Suddenly, Loya sighed and said firmly, "This kind of world. It's your world, not mine. Then don't blame us, Loya." Garp roared, and his domineering fists attacked Loya again. As far as melee combat is concerned, Garp has the confidence that even if he can't suppress Loya like he can suppress Guy, he can still contain him and create opportunities for others. At this moment, the two of them are firm in their will, and there is no room for relaxation. Fistbone Meteor Group. The empty-handed Garp used this move, which did not have the attack range of throwing artillery shells, but the power was more concentrated and the punches were heavier. For the first time, Roja really had the illusion of facing the Meteor Group. However, Loya's all-round development, whether it is close or remote, is the existence of the peak of the world. He leaned back suddenly, the dragon claws in both hands wrapped around the domineering, and then the upper limbs were pulled back, and the whole figure rushed towards Garp like a fully charged spring. Finger guns 8 children. Jingle jingle. Obviously it was a collision between flesh and blood, but there were bursts of gold and iron in the air. The ice field beneath their feet crumbled one after another in the aftermath of the fight, like the end of the world, proving that the two of them did their best in this fight. The 8 children's move comes from the King of Fighters series, Yagamian, who is a charming character, simple and crazy. When Loya was still under the guidance of Zepha, he developed this trick based on the characteristics of his claws after his transformation. There is no purple fire, but he has ice. And as a skill named after his favorite character's move, this move Loya is not just a quick claw swing. This kind of fast attack battle often occurs in the world of Pirate King, just like Luffy's most commonly used move, Rubber Machine Gun, but simply increasing the attack area and number of times. Before the speed reaches a limit, the actual combat effectiveness that can be exerted very limited. And now Loya's speed is not enough to crush Garp. So in order to restrain this kind of opponent who will be difficult to deal with when he is close, Loya has prepared various skills to fight against, and in the next few months, he will continue to exercise in depth every day. His 8 young girls are not only fast, not only strong, but also like Yagami Temple, with clear ideas and sequence of shots, belonging to a separate martial arts. Bang! Seizing the opportunity, Dragon Claw pushed Garp's fist away from a tricky angle. Garp, who found something wrong, didn't have time to make a corresponding defense, and was suddenly pressed by Loya's claws on his chest. 5 sharp claws tore the skin, and he was about to take out his lungs. At a critical moment, Garp bit Kiba and launched an attack on himself. If Loya didn't let go, his claws would shatter along with Garp's chest. Iron Fist. Garp's fist is so powerful. And even if he can resist, Loya doesn't want to exchange injuries with the opponent. Because in addition to Garp, a few kilometers away, there are a bunch of bigwigs eyeing him. So, Loya pulled back decisively, while Garp was punched by himself, stuck to the ice field with a slap, and rolled over and over by the recoil. 5 blood holes were opened in the chest by Loya Dragon Claw, and he was also punched by himself. The 2 damages were superimposed, and even Garp was not seriously injured this time. Lying on the ice, feeling the coldness of the wound and the ice sticking together, Garp smiled bitterly inwardly. Still getting old. If it was 20 years ago, even if Roja caught the flaw, he would be able to make an effective defense, and it would be okay to cover the striking surface with armament hockey of sufficient strength. However, now, in the face of Loya's unrelenting attack, he could only watch him wave his claws and fall. Suddenly, Garp felt a tingling pain in his chest, which made him stand up all of a sudden. And with his movements, the skin around the blood hole was torn open, revealing Yuhi's muscles inside. That is Loya's ice. Without the protection of armed colors, anyone standing on this ice field will be frostbitten by the cold air, let alone close together. Seeing Garp regain his posture, Loya shook his head. Give it up, this sea needs you to maintain stability. Isn't it more important to clean up the pirates than to trouble me? Cough. The ice cubes are not a one-sided danger. With the contact just now, at least the blood has stopped. But the cold air that penetrated his body made Garp suffer from knife-like colic with every breath, and he couldn't help coughing. Hearing Loya's words, Garp showed a smile on the corner of his mouth. I'm sorry Loya, this is something we decided together. Together we will. In other words, Teacher Zephyr and Teacher Kuzan both agreed. Sighing slightly, Loya didn't say anything more, raised his fist and rushed towards Karp. The negotiation failed, prepare to do it. Listening to the blind voice coming from the microphone, Sengoku knew that Garp was no longer able to support himself. The phone bug was hiding in Garp's chest, and it was destroyed, meaning Garp's chest was hit hard. If he can, he is also unwilling to play against Loya. But things backfired. For justice, he had to make this decision. Here you stay here, if something goes wrong with you, it won't make any sense for us to defeat him. Just as he was about to set off with the four of them, Lieutenant General Crane was stunned when he heard Sengoku's order, looking at Sengoku in disbelief. Karp is fighting desperately over there, and you made me wait here for the result. Is that what you mean, Sengoku? Not daring to look at Crane's firm eyes, Sengoku turned his head and walked towards the ice road that Aokiji opened, leaving only one sentence. This is an order, Lieutenant General Crane. Enough of his comrades in arms had died back then, and Zephyr had also become a cripple. If all three of them died in battle, who would be able to stand up for those soldiers and soldiers related to Loya? In the face of the purge from the world government, who among them can stand up at a critical moment? Since the day Loya withdrew from the Navy, this has become an endless endgame. So. Sorry, Crane. Washing the fruit can wash away the evil thoughts in other people's hearts and purify one's soul. In the original plan, Sengoku told Lieutenant General Crane that when they defeated Loya, she would use the fruit ability to turn Loya back. Even if it's killing one's freedom of thought, even if it's against their justice, Sengoku has to do it for the sake of peace. The Admiral and the Admiral were both moving very fast, and in order to support Garp, the four of them accelerated their pace. A few minutes later, they found the center of the battle between the two, and at this time, Garp was already injured and his eyes were half open. He couldn't see much blood on his body, but the four people who knew Garp knew that if it wasn't really to the point where he couldn't support it, his hands wouldn't tremble. That's it, Loya. Sengoku jumped up and turned into a huge Buddha in the air, and the shockwave in his palm aimed at Loya mercilessly and launched it. At the same time, Akainu's lava turned into a vicious dog and charged towards Loya overwhelmingly. Bang! Chapter 496 Skylight Speed Kick 7th Dan. Attacked by the two top naval forces, even though the ice field was made of Dragon Slayer magic, and its hardness was comparable to that of steel, it was instantly opened. The tumbling magma and the aftermath of the shock slapped the surrounding ice, turning the place from icy to an active volcano. When the magma met the ice cubes and solidified together, the water mist from the loss of temperature and transpiration instantly filled the audience. With a successful hit, Sengoku and Akainu fell from the sky and stood in front of Garp vigilantly. Aokiji didn't participate in the attack. He came to Garp with a barrel of needles. The two looked at each other, and then bit Kiba and injected it into Garp's artery. As the green liquid continued to pour in, Garp's breath finally calmed down. He tore off his tattered shirt and laughed loudly. PFF'd ha ha ha, Loya, do you think you won? At this moment, Garp can no longer see a trace of fatigue all over his body. Even the blood holes in his chest, the granulation inside is rapidly weaving, stitching the wounds together. Thank you, Aokiji. After moving a bit, Garp stepped forward and stood side by side with Sengoku and Akainu, watching the area obscured by the fog. The three of them set up their attack stances and carefully observed the traces around them. What if they were the highest naval forces united? As for Loya's strength, the 5 old stars are not as clear as their parties. In the last era, Baroric Redfield was extremely powerful, and he was on par with Roger and Whitebeard alone. In order to capture him, the Navy at that time came out in full force, and used a more extravagant lineup of combat power than it is now to barely capture him. On top of him, Ulysses, the former, world's strongest, and, blood count, even single-handedly beat all the masters from 100 years ago. Even the Navy and the world government have no confidence to fight against him. The guy standing in front of them now is the stronger man who defeated Ulysses and is several times more terrifying than these two. Ice Dragon, Loya. Life and death, success and failure, or really only in the blink of an eye. But it can't be said that there is no chance. They practiced secretly for many days, and they were waiting for this day. As if in response to their expectations, an overwhelming huge ice wing stretched out from the fog, and then fell heavily. Whoa! The gust of wind swept in an instant, slapping the hot distilled liquid heated by the lava on a group of people. If an ordinary person were to come here, they would be scalded and cooked in the aftermath, but for them, this temperature did not even qualify them to escape. So what? Do you really think you have a chance to win? Without starting immediately, Loya raised his chin arrogantly and looked at the several navy bosses in front of him. The green liquid contained extremely strong vitality, allowing Garp to join the battle in a perfect state. But he who has already been defeated once, how can he help the current situation? The combination of the three is indeed very strong. Akainu's magma, Sengoku's suppression, and Garp's fist, which one is not a top-level power in the sea. However, for defeating Loya, it is still more than a star and a half. Did they want to grind themselves to death? Just like dealing with Guy. As soon as this idea emerged, it was rejected by Loya. In terms of physical strength, Loya is not afraid of anyone in the world. If they really think so, then Loya doesn't mind telling them what reality is. 8-foot mirror, a section of the sky. Suddenly, a golden light Jinchuriki column shot from across the far sea, where it has exceeded Loya's perception range, plus the light's propagation speed, when Loya discovered the attack from the yellow monkey, light Jinchuriki. Column is less than 10 centimeters away from him. Kazuna's light speed kick. What does he want to do? Loya frowned, not understanding the thoughts of several people. With this level of attack, even his defense can't be broken. Boom! The golden light Jinchuriki column exploded immediately, like a signal, which made the three people who were watching immediately move. The three of Sengoku jumped up and joined the battle. All kinds of attacks came head-on, aggressive. As the rest joined the battle, Kizaru continued to prepare his own attack from a distance. 8-foot mirror second paragraph. 3 sections. Kizaru's attack is completely unable to find the direction. As a person with the ability of the flash fruit, if he wants to avoid the enemy, he can avoid being discovered by anyone, not even Roha. The 3 rays of light, Jinchuriki column, smashed heavily on Roha at almost the same time, and at the same time, Garp, ignoring the aftermath of the explosion, roared and appeared in front of Roha like an evil spirit. The orange-yellow air film on the fist quickly turned golden, which is what happens when the temperature reaches an ultimate. Fist bone shattered star. This is a terrifying attack that can blow up the stars. As Garp's mysterious move to establish his status, it was finally used on Loya at this moment. Not hard to resist. Loya made this judgment instantly. As soon as his mind moved, a thick layer of ice cubes instantly appeared between the two of them. Ice Coffin. This is Roha's strongest defensive magic, and it has always been his trump card. The dragon-killing magic power contained in the ice coffin can isolate all energy intrusions, and with that kind of hardness, it is an invincible defense. Don't think about it. At this moment, it was not Sengoku and Akainu who stopped Roha, but Aokiji who had been watching the play from the start of the battle. His freezing attribute was restrained by Roya, but Roya could rely on the ice cubes that devoured him to explode briefly, so he had no chance to shoot before. But now it's alright, Roya's ice coffin is also the power of the ice attribute. Aokiji can mix his own ice in it when Roya uses this move, which cannot be stopped, but it can greatly reduce its defensibility. The two sides are already familiar with each other and can no longer be familiar with each other. In order to defeat Loya, they have done a lot of targeted work. The ice coffin condenses quickly, but in order to resist Garp's attack, the speed is still not as fast as Aokiji's moves. Almost at the same time, the formation of the ice coffin was disturbed by the green pheasant, and it was mixed with the ice of his ordinary strength. And Garp's fist also landed heavily on the defective ice coffin. Bang! In an instant, the ice coffin was blown up by Capson. The terrifying vibration was transmitted to the body with the ice cube connected to the body, so that Loya only felt that his chest was stuffy for a while, and a mouthful of blood spurted out. The punching force coming out of his body left a wide dent on the sea behind him, and he couldn't see the head at a glance. Then, Sengoku immediately appeared behind Loya, and his raised fist was wrapped in a magnificent divine light. Repression Tathagata. This is Sengoku's strongest mystical move, the strongest ability in the form of the great Buddha. In fact, it is not a shock wave that is simply used to attack, but this invisible energy that suppresses the enemy. You must know that in the original naval iron triangle, the main person responsible for the attack has always been Karp alone. Before the fist fell on his body, Loya had the illusion that his whole body was submerged in the deep sea, making him unable to move at all. That invisible and intangible pressure is pressing on him from all directions, squeezing his ability to move. Drink. Terrible energy fell from the sky, and this battlefield was directly pressed into the sea dozens of meters deep. On both sides are the high wave curtains, like the Wuji mountain seen by the monkeys. Before he could break free, Akainu stepped forward quickly, and a shot of the ghost dog was ready, and slammed heavily on Loya's belly that had lost the protection of the ice. Boom, boom. The high-ranking navy shot together, and this kind of power is a little more terrifying than the previous battle. The monstrous waves rose up and disappeared into the distance in the blink of an eye. Suddenly, a beam of light Jinchuriki column penetrated the waves, smashed the waves dozens of meters thick in midair, and came straight at Loya. 8th Mirror, the fourth segment of the sky. 5 paragraphs. Then 6 paragraphs. 7 paragraphs. What? Loya's eyes widened in surprise, sensing the amount of light Jinchuriki column that struck. Kizaru himself once said that his skylight speed kick is a power charging move, and the power will be doubled for each additional power charging opportunity. Before that, he could only do up to 6 stages of charging, and he could only use 5 stages on weekdays, but he didn't expect that at this moment, he could actually use 7 stages. The speed of light kick of the 7th segment of the sky. What is this concept? A light speed kick that is 128 times stronger than normal. The 7 golden rays of light Jinchuriki column exploded one after another, but in the sky, there is still a 7-pointed star connected by the 7 rays of light Jinchuriki column. Loya, who has seen this trick, knows why, because the speed is too fast, and it is just an afterimage in their eyes. Suddenly, the 7-pointed star shrank suddenly, and then quickly condensed into a huge light curtain that covered the sky and the sun. The final stage, the sky kicks at the speed of light. Seemingly knowing that Kizaru's move was not easy to deal with, Sengoku and the others didn't stop, not greedy for achievements, and quickly spread out. Then, the golden light Jinchuriki column fell from the sky, drowning Loya in the bright golden light. Boom. This is truly a mess. As soon as the powerful impact arrived, the entire sea was opened with a circular Jinchuriki column-shaped channel directly to the bottom of the sea. And it's not over yet. The sediment reefs on the bottom of the sea where I didn't know how many Eternals had settled were easily crushed and swarmed wildly around, while the Jinchuriki column continued to go deeper. At this moment, Sengoku and the others did not dare to approach, and they stepped on the moon and tried their best to rise. Because in addition to this penetrating ability, the strongest damage of the glitter fruit comes from the subsequent explosion. As soon as it was said, they were already hundreds of meters high in the sky, and a shocking impact suddenly hit their backs, leading them to a higher sky. On the spot, nothing could be seen at the moment. Whether it was seawater or air, whether it was ice or lava, all disappeared in this suffocating explosion. Only a huge golden orb remained on the horizon. Chapter 497 Shoot Down the Sea. Is the Navy weak? Maybe. Just a white beard forced the Navy to go all out, and destroyed the magnificent fortress that had stood for hundreds of years in the Navy headquarters, and Akainu almost died on the battlefield. In this light, the Navy may indeed be weak. But is this really the case? In fact, if you carefully study the contradictions in it, you can know that it is not that the Navy is too weak, but that the Whitebeard is too strong. If in the top battle, their opponent was not Whitebeard, and if they were one of the other 4 emperors, it would be a different situation. It is precisely because their opponent is the world's strongest, and Aokiji and Kizaru are still paddling all the way, and Garp and Sengoku have not made much shots, which leads to the view that the navy is useless in the eyes of the world. The position of the 4 emperors is not self-proclaimed, it is the emotion of countless people about the 4 unstoppable and terrible forces in the New World. And among such a group of people, Whitebeard is still the strongest one. It is even said that it is an old man who is old and frail and must rely on a hanging bottle and a respirator to recuperate his body. If it weren't for the fact that Whitebeard was too strong, would Charlotte Lingling let it go and let him be on an equal footing with herself in the New World, blocking her way to become the Pirate King? Among the 4 emperors today, she is probably the only one who has the purest dream, the dream of becoming the Pirate King. But she didn't dare to do it. No matter how much she peeps at Fishman Island, she can only snatch the territory after Whitebeard's death. Because if she made a move, all nations would cease to exist. And she can't even take revenge. This is Whitebeard. The strongest existence in the world. Even other people who are also the 4 emperors can't match the Whitebeard. The reason why Oda wanted Whitebeard to die is not only because he is a remnant of the old times, but also because Whitebeard's power is too strong. If he didn't only care about his family, he would be the new One Piece, and there would be no 2 to speak of. So Whitebeard died, and he died violently in the war on the top. Open the curtain of a new era. Akainu used a plan to turn against the big Uzumaki spider, who had a grudge against Roger, and severely injured the seriously ill old man. Then, the crack was still shot down by the already riddled Whitebeard, leaving scars for a lifetime. If he hadn't reacted in time, he would have fallen into the sea and drowned. One can imagine how powerful Whitebeard is. So regardless of what he showed, Akainu was able to fight against Whitebeard in a seriously injured state and even pierce his belly without anyone else intervening. His seemingly inferior record was a testament to the strength of the navy. Pain deep into the soul. Loya was lying in the big pit on the bottom of the sea, listening to the sound of the explosion that kept recalling in his ears. A wry smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. This is the 2nd time. The last time he was injured so badly was when he was kicked by Kizaru at the speed of light on the day of the prison death fight, and he fell into the pit with the same powerlessness. The defense he was proud of was ruthlessly smashed by the fact, and the 128-fold increase in the speed of light in the sky was enough to shatter his scales and armament hockey. If it is still only 5 stages, with a 32-fold increase in attack, Roha has the confidence to fight hard and not be injured. But 128 times the increase. This is far beyond his limit. To be careless, the world-famous powerhouse is really not such a good character. Allowing the backwater to drown himself, Loya floated in the turbid seawater, closing his eyes to adjust his breath. The strength of the dragon's body doesn't need to be said more, even if he can't move because of the pain at this time. As long as he takes a few breaths quietly, he will be a hero who is alive and well. And when the master returns his life, this resilience will be even stronger. The airflow of the explosion gradually calmed down, and the huge deep pit in the sea that was comparable to an island disappeared. Kasaragi was held by Garp around his waist, and followed them to land on the ice floes made by Aokiji. It seems that the battle was brilliant, and Roha lost his ability to move with one blow, and he didn't know if he was going into the deep sea. But only they who were the parties knew how dangerous the cooperation just now was. Absolute power. Defense overbearing. Speed ultimate. Magical. In the face of such a perfect enemy with no weakness, they only need to make a little mistake, and what awaits them is the terrifying counterattack of Roha. And if Loa is given a momentary gap, then the situation at the Navy headquarters will repeat itself. In front of that ability to freeze time and space, they can't do anything at all. In order to complete this cooperation, several people secretly trained for many days, and then this incredible lore was completed. Cough, cough. Karp knelt on the ground with a puff, his hands loosened, and Kyabu rolled directly into the distance. Feeling the pain that kept coming from his body, Kizaru reluctantly opened his eyes, but still complained in a wretched tone, "Mr. Garp, I am wounded, be gentle." "Lieutenant General Garp, what are you doing, already?" Quote. The 7-stage power-charged Skylight Speedkick is not so easy to use. Just like Luffy's ultimate 4th block 2 years later, it has extremely strong sequelae. But just halfway through the words, Kizaru couldn't care about complaining and shouted nervously. This exclamation attracted the attention of several people, and saw Garp, who was half-kneeling on the ground, with a pale face. It is a kind of white that has lost its vitality, and there is almost no blood on the whole body. Just like those undead soldiers under Loya. Not good. Thinking of Loya's method, Sengoku couldn't take his breath and turned back into the form of the Great Buddha. He stared at Garp nervously, the shock wave in his hand ready to go. "Cap, answer me, who are you?" Judging from the current information, no matter who it is, after becoming an undead, it will become a puppet that only obeys Loya's orders. Although they had great confidence in Garp, they couldn't stand the example of Ulysses. Even the former, Blood Count, Ulysses couldn't resist the corruption of undead magic, so what about Garp? Garp's eyes were flashing with gray-green and blue-gray. He lay on the ground and retched, and wobbly raised one hand, on his chest. That was the position that was clasped by the Loya Dragon Claw before. Although the wound has healed, there are still 5 scars of crimson Yuhi. This scene fell in Sengoku's eyes, that is, he was sensing whether he still had a heartbeat. When the strength has reached their level, don't you know if you have a heartbeat? So this behavior is the same, and is regarded by Sengoku as proof that Garp has been undead. "I'm sorry, Garp." Sengoku can't bear to shoot at his close comrade, but for justice, the undead Garp must be eliminated. Hum. There was a sudden humming in the air, and the rest of the people also made preparations for battle. Akainu and Sengoku were a little out of breath, Kasaragi lost their strength, and now the main fighting force is Aokiji. Imitating the funeral of Loya's ice waterfall, the layers of ice were rolled up from under his feet, always ready to wrap Garp inside. At this moment, a crisp sound echoed in the middle of the venue. The stinging pain on his face made Sengoku almost tremble his hands and shoot out shock waves, but when he saw the old man appearing in front of him, his eyes widened in disbelief. "Crane-chan, why? Go back and explain to you." Lieutenant General Crane glanced at Sengoku with a bad expression, and then said to Aokiji, who was ready to attack, "Look clearly. This is a side effect of SPX9. Huh. A group of people were stunned, and suddenly remembered what Mephisto Middle said when he handed them these potions. So far, no one can survive the process of filling the body with vitality, and those with strong physiques can only support it for a few more seconds. Only by releasing the vitality before it expands to the critical point can there be a chance to avoid being burst. So don't try to use it unless you have to. And what happens to the people who survived after using SPX9? The scene of suddenly overdrawing a lot of life force seems to be the same as Karpa's now. Huh. Several people suddenly breathed a sigh of relief, and Garp also lay on the ground with a wry smile. "It's too uncomfortable, let him talk, it's better to give him a good one." Chapter 498 Fight Back. If it weren't for the strong side effects, the drug SPX9 would have been equipped on a large scale. Garp also had the consciousness of being overwhelmed by vitality, and then agreed to let Aokiji inject this thing into himself. But even Garp, even using the mysterious skill, Broken Star, which is basically unusable after getting old, still failed to vent all the huge vitality. At this moment, the life force from outside kept rolling inside him, making Garp speechless. More importantly, in the position where Loya attacked just now, that vitality still collided and strangled each other with the unknown energy in it. The two energies used his body as a battlefield, and they fought hard. The pain that followed was like a knife. Ordinary people have long been unconscious or even cardiac arrest in this kind of pain. Do not fall. Unexpectedly, this action made Sengoku misunderstand and almost died at his own hands. Lying on the ground, Garp took a few breaths and said to Lieutenant General He with a wry smile, "Thank you, He. Don't talk, get out of here quickly." Suddenly, the crane's expression became serious. "Don't you really think that you can kill Loya with the attack just now? According to the records, it was a monster that could fight Guy more than a year ago. You can't kill Guy, so naturally you can't kill Loya." Huh. A group of people suddenly came to their senses. Indeed, in terms of defense, today's Roja is not much of Guy's opponent, but he is not weaker than Guy. And he's as much as Guy. That kind of resilience is appalling. I am afraid that it will not be long before Loya will regain his fighting power. The most important thing is, Loya is not a devil fruit person. In the sea, he will not be restricted. The rest of the people looked at Kizaru, wanting him to tell them a clear answer. As the lore of this cooperation, whether it is Sengoku's suppression or Garp's broken star, they are actually creating an opportunity for him to use the 7-stage charge. Kizaru understood what they wanted to ask, and shook his head weakly. Although the attack did hit, he didn't suffer much damage when he left my perception range. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. Didn't they get mortally wounded in that level of attack? At this time, Garp also shook his head. My broken star broke a few of his bones, but for Roja, it must not be a small injury. The testimony of the two men showed a serious problem, that is, their interception did not go as smoothly as expected. Loya is not only still alive, he even said that he was not seriously injured. Immediately, Sengoku's face turned ashen, and he had to admit that the operation ultimately failed. Like Guy Duo, they couldn't destroy Roja's defense at all, and the sea couldn't restrain the Dragon Slayer wizard, and Roja's counterattack was only fleeting. Quickly took out the phone bug with his backhand, and Sengoku shouted loudly to the people over there, "The operation failed. Hurry up and take us away." Understood. At the speed of Loya's flight, Sengoku and the others could still set up the ambush circle in advance, so they definitely wouldn't have run over with that warship, but had other convenient and fast ways of moving. If Loya is here, you can find that the side of the phone bug is the companion of Rob Luki who was defeated by him. He is also a member of CP9, the fruit of the door, Bruno. Rob Ludge and others received the task back then to come to the Navy headquarters to beat the elite battalion members of his class. The request of the Tianlong people could not be refused. In order to avoid mistakes in the hidden mission, Bruno, who was the owner of the bar at the time, did not go to the naval headquarters with them. It was that miss that allowed Bruno to live to this day. And think about it, since it was the Tianlong people who cooperated with Sengoku and others to formulate this plan of encirclement and suppression, then as an espionage organization under the world government, there is no problem in mobilizing a Bruno. Sengoku finished speaking, a square-shaped crack suddenly appeared in the air, and then the air was pushed hard, revealing Bruno who was hiding in a different space. "Everyone, please, be careful." At this moment, a stream of water Jinchuriki columns suddenly rose from the sea, and the wide flapping dragon wings were like a curtain that covered the sky and the sun, leaning against the direction of the sun, shrouding the people below in shadows. Loya did not stop the few people who were running to the air door, silently sketching the magic circle in the palm of his hand. He is really angry at this moment. Although the foreign object interference that can be used instantaneously can freeze the time and space, it cannot hurt the local natives such as Sengoku. Only Mokobatmo, who needs to release time, is the best choice now. Piran's magic power suddenly appeared in the sky, and the rich magic power filled this small area, making it clear to Sengoku and others who could not see the existence of magic power. Pushing Garp and Crane into the door, Sengoku was about to say something when Loya's cold voice resounded through the sky. "Moke, Batmo." Swish. All of a sudden, the world stopped moving, whether it was Sengoku's anxious eyes or the blood dripping from Garp. They were still in place, like a picture scroll, calm and natural. But looking at the picture on the scroll, you can tell that this picture depicts a hell. Amidst the ice and snow, a ferocious human-shaped giant dragon flew high in the sky, looking down at everything on the ground. Floating in the air, Surrounded by a huge circular magic circle, the mysterious runes on it kept spinning, releasing the magic of freezing time and space. Raising his hand calmly, a blue energy ball floated in Loya's palm, crushing it gently. The profound truth of slaying the dragon, the land of the end. In Mokobotmo, no sound can be transmitted, because the time in which this area is located has been frozen by Loya from the inside out. However, the scene in front of him still made people hear a clack. In this area, endless ice spreads wildly in all directions. Maybe it's just pure white, like a huge oil brush, dyeing all the scrolls pure white. There is no longer any separation between the sky and the sea, and the world is full of white colors, and it is impossible to distinguish between the upper and the lower, the east and the west. In this white world, only Loya floats quietly in midair, bringing a touch of life to this still world. Hey, Aokiji-sensei. Loya's face was a little melancholy, and his eyes were a little tired. What he did, after all, was not accepted by them, it was within the plan, and it was reasonable. Walking down slowly, a transparent ladder appeared in the void, carrying Loya's weight. Coming to the door opened by Bruno, Loya took out an envelope from his arms and put it in Kabuto's clothes. That's what Jones wants to give to Zephyr. Bruno's different space was also frozen, because when he opened the door, the different space that existed in another dimension had access to this world. The space there is not very big, and for Loya, in other words, there is no difficulty in freezing together. A streak of blue energy shot out from Loya's fingertips and sank into Bruno's chest. Afterwards, Loya turned his head firmly in his eyes, and slowly closed the door made of solidified air. Looking at the few people still standing on the ice sheet, a smile appeared on the corner of Loya's mouth. Then let's try next, who of you can survive? Bang! The extremely domineering Longway spread out, shaking the ice field into bottomless ravines. On this piece of barren frozen soil that symbolizes death, the endless ice slowly began to move, condensing bit by bit towards Loya's location. Click! A crack suddenly appeared in the void, which was the sound of this space-time. There is a limit to the amount of time that Mokobotmo can freeze, and beyond this limit, even Loya cannot remedy it. Not to mention that Loya still used the forbidden level mystery move here, the end of the land, which has already made the magic circle supporting the freezing on the verge of collapse. And now, Luoya is not ready to stop, and took out his second profound skill. Click click. The cracks are getting bigger and bigger, and they are densely packed like cobwebs, from top to bottom, all over the area where time stops rotating. Then, with a crisp sound that did not exist in the outside world, time finally began to pass. Sengoku widened his eyes and looked at Loya, who appeared in front of him in a blink of an eye. He wanted to open his mouth to say something, but was immediately blocked by the severe cold around him. However, the end of the land is not enough to freeze such strong men to death, and the next attack is Roha's final killing move. After the heavy blow, the tattered clothes were completely blown up, and the dragon scales on Loya's body stood up, setting off his fierceness. Dragon Slayer profound truth. Tianyu is here. 499th shake the world. A few days later, a shocking news spread across the sea. The Navy's highest combat power teamed up to ambush Ice Dragon, Loya, and finally lost to 3 people and died. Close double angle bracket. Whoa. If Loya's previous news all reflected how powerful he was from the side, then this time, it proved his strength from the front. If it weren't for the Chambord newspaper being the most famous newspaper on the great airline, and it also has the background of the world government behind it, I'm afraid no one would believe this news to be true at all. But it is so. In this battle, all the elites of the Navy headquarters will be released, from the headquarters Marshal of Buddha Sengoku, to the lowest-ranked headquarters Lieutenant General Garp, all the top combat powers will be shot. This kind of power, even if it is used to destroy one of the 4 emperors, is enough. But what was the result? Ice Dragon, Loya's return to the New World could not be concealed, because where he was flying, there would definitely be heavy snow and hail. So blatantly revealing his existence in front of the world proves that Loya has not suffered any harm. On the other hand, on the Navy side, apart from Lieutenant General Crane who was unhurt, Garp, the Navy hero, was seriously injured in bed, and General Chingzi was dying. The other three, Marshal Sengoku, General Akainu, and General Kizaru, were all left in the ice and snow. Until the moment when the news was sent, the three people who were frozen into ice sculptures were still standing on that piece of ice. Clap Lala. World uproar. That huge ice area that spans 1/3 of the Great Air Route, even if you stand on the Yuhi soil continent, you can't see the end at a glance. The name of the ice dragon, starting from this day, has completely become the sword of Damocles pressing on the world's heads. Because he has the real power to destroy the world. But on the night the news came out, another new news came out. The life and death of the three marshals are unknown, waiting to be rescued. Close double angle bracket. This time the whole world was at a loss. Whether the three of Sengoku died or not was a very important question. If they were dead, it would represent the strongest force on the Great Route. The Navy headquarters was silent. If they hadn't died, Ice Dragon Loya wouldn't look so scary. Is it true that the world government is in the dark, or is it true? At this moment, the eyes of the whole world are focused on the legendary scientist Vegapunk, wanting to know what he is going to do. New World, 4 Emperors, Yuhi Fa, Shanks Waters. After not seeing him for many days, Mihawk felt a little more sad and relieved. He didn't say it, and Shanks was reluctant to ask. He was just like the restless ordinary people, concerned about the life and death of the three of Sengoku. See for yourself. Mihawk impatiently tossed him a newspaper with an exclusive report on the news agency's interview with Vegapunk. Said he would use brand new technology to rescue Sengoku and others from the ice. It's not my fault, you know the style of the world government. Shanks threw the newspaper aside without looking at it. He had read this newspaper several times, and he had been able to recite and dictate the whole text. I can't trust them. This sentence is a fact. Hiding the truth to obliterate reality is the most common method used by world governments to maintain stability. After a while, as if he couldn't stand being asked, Mihawk pulled up his sleeves, revealing a scary bruise called Madara. Shanks could of course see that Mihawk was frostbitten, and even now, the shivering cold was still being released from the wound. If it weren't for the pungent odor bandage around Ching Madara, I'm afraid the frostbite would continue to spread. Suddenly, Shanks' pupils tightened and he asked nervously, "Did you fight him?" "No, it's just the aftermath of his attack." Mihawk let out a long breath, recalling what he saw that day. All the senior officers of the Navy headquarters were dispatched to besiege Loya, and the earth-shaking shaking was discovered early on by the world. This is also the reason why news agencies can publish it, because there is no way to hide it. Out of curiosity, Mihawk moved a little closer. Of course, there is also his self-confidence as the world's #1 swordsman in it. Just watching closely, he is confident that he will not be hurt. However, the result was quite the opposite. As soon as he approached, there was a terrifying fluctuation in the air, which made his whole thinking freeze at that moment. When he came back to his senses, a white light Jinchuriki column had come straight to his face. Even if he tried to dodge, he was still wiped by the light Jinchuriki column. This blue-purple frostbite scar was left at that moment. If his movements slowed a little bit at that time, it is very likely that this hand would not be able to be preserved. Is it so strong? Shanks sucked in a breath, just relying on the aftermath of the attack to injure Mihawk. Is Mihawk too weak, or is Loya too strong? Wait. Suddenly, Shanks got the point. If there is such power, then Sengoku, who are the targets of attack? Thinking of this, Shanks' face became ugly. If Mihawk can be hurt by the aftermath alone, what about the 3 Sengoku who appeared at the center of the battle? Presumably, it's very cold and cold to die. That is to say, this world is going to collapse completely. Maybe. Mihawk couldn't answer the question, his eyes fixed on the newspaper. The 3 ice sculptures behind Vegapunk seemed to be distributed in different directions from the direction of the attack he encountered. Emergency conscription. Lying on the hospital bed, Qingzi held the information given to him by Lieutenant General Crane suspiciously, and widened his eyes in surprise. Opposite him, Crane, who was temporarily serving as the acting marshal, sat beside Garp, frowning at Garp who was still unconscious. Regardless of whether Sengoku can be rescued or not, there is no top-level combat power that the Navy can rely on now. Admiral Crane was very self-aware and did not count himself. However, her remarks can be regarded as answering a doubt. Sengoku and others are indeed still alive, but the probability of being rescued is very low. Ordinary pirates, flying squirrels and the others can handle it a little harder. But the more powerful guys, even the 4 emperors, if they make any moves, we don't have the confidence to fight them now. Aokiji was dumbfounded and dejected. 4 emperors. That's true. Now they don't talk about the 4 emperors, even the rest of the Chiwahai are noisy, and the Navy in this state can't clean up. However, will they miss such a good opportunity? Especially the pirate empress, Boya Hancock, the king of the daughter country has never been in our affection for the Navy. He used to be able to frighten them with his fists. Can the Navy still do it now? Therefore, the top priority is undoubtedly to expand the top-level combat power. The world government didn't want the pirates to make trouble, so they sent experts from all over the world to work in the world government. However, these masters often have other goals in mind, and the longer they drag on, the more likely they will have problems. So the world is bound to recruit troops, and fast. When Qingzi was silent, Crane suddenly saw Garp's clothes, which had a prominent square protrusion, just like a card. She opened the clothes curiously, and a card and an envelope fell out. Looking at the words on the card, Lieutenant General Crane suddenly widened his eyes. This is... Bang! At this moment, Zephyr pushed open the door heavily and walked in. Behind him, Aiyin apologized to the soldiers who heard the sound, and hurried to catch up with Zephyr. With a list in his hand, Zephyr walked quickly to the Crane and asked angrily, Why is the new Chiwahai him? Chapter 500 World Conscription. And the new Shichibukai. After careful calculation, until the end of the Sea Garden calendar 1519, there are not many original Chiwahai still active in the world. Krokdar became the Plague Lord, under Loya's command. Moria was blown up in Alabasta, and Doflamingo was wiped out in the world. In the remaining Chiwahai, the Sea Man lives in seclusion very often. If there is no major event that affects the relationship between Murlocs, mermen, and humans, they basically live on Mermaid Island at the entrance to the New World. Hawkeye, Mahawk has always been a loner, accepting challenges from various swordsmen if he is interested, but more often he does not go out. Because of Vegapunk's relationship, the Violent Coon Bear has now become a world-famous lackey of the world government, almost out of the word pirate. And the daughter country is far away from the Windless Belt, and the deterrent power to the pirates on the Great Route is far less than the rest of the people. Compared with the Chiwahai, it is more because of her reputation as the world's first beauty. Among the current Chiwahai, the most famous is Alien Jones, who has just joined for more than a year. Turtle Island is located in the sea at the entrance to the New World. No matter which route the pirates take, there is a chance to meet Turtle Island, a movable island. This makes almost 1/5 of the pirates who pass through the Paradise and enter the New World every year become Jones's record. However, Jones is Loya's subordinate. The Navy has long known this, and after the Dressrosa incident, it has become well known. Rather than being afraid of Jones, it would be better to say that he was afraid of Loya. After all, there are only 5 people in Chiwahai now, and one of them is Loya's subordinate. What others are afraid of is not the Navy and the world government, but Loya, the worst dragon. This makes the 3 words, Chiwahai, more of a decoration, and it does not play much role in deterring pirates. Those who are afraid of them will still be afraid, and those who are not afraid will not be afraid. After all, if you can't even get 7 together, how can you still call yourself 7 Wuhai? The Navy is of course unwilling to continue the Chiwahai system, but now the situation is forced, the Chiwahai must raise its deterrent power. Not only can it not be revoked, but it must be protected well. And a new Chihuahua with great strength and outstanding record is undoubtedly the stone that suppressed the situation. Coupled with the world conscription that has already started preparations, if the effect is outstanding, then the Navy will be the strongest Navy in a year at most. It's just that there are some little festivals between this newly appointed Chihuahua and Zephyr. And after the news is announced, his previous record will also be announced together, so as to convince the public. Tell me, Crane, why him? Zephyr stared at a pair of tiger eyes and stared at the Crane's eyes. He wanted to hear Crane helplessly tell him that this was a request from the world government, and that she, as a subordinate, was powerless. But this is unlikely. Because this list was passed on from the Navy to the world government. In other words, the person who made this decision was the old comrade in arms in front of him. The atmosphere suddenly became solemn. Aokiji silently pulled down his blindfold, lying down and pretending to sleep. Edward Wable. Lieutenant General Crane silently accepted the invitation letter, and then said, his strength and record are obvious to all. Now he is willing to accept the invitation of Chihuahua, which is of great significance for stabilizing the situation in the sea. It's more meaningful than he killed my disciple and cut off my arm. There was an indescribable bleakness in Zephyr's eyes, that kind of eyes full of longing and pleading, an expression that this tiger has never shown in his life. Crane took a deep breath and nodded in Zephyr's desperate eyes, yes. She couldn't give a negative answer, so instead of being silent, she might as well be straightforward. This is the last respect she can give Zephyr as an old friend and comrade in arms. Ah, is that so? Zephyr seems to be a few years old all of a sudden. Even if he becomes a cripple and can't do anything, he can maintain a calm and optimistic attitude. But now he can't do it. Is it because of become a cripple? No, it's not you. Before the Crane could finish speaking, Zephyr raised her hand to stop her from continuing. With his trembling hands, he pressed Ian's cloak to keep out the cold, and walked out while coughing. General Staff of the Navy Headquarters. Unparalleled resourcefulness. Acting Marshal. So what? Crane could not find any words to comfort Zephyr now, and could only watch him go away silently. That desolate back made her heart palpitate and chill. After a long silence, the Crane turned his head and threw the envelope to Aokiji, who seemed to be asleep, and ordered, "Give this thing to Zephyr, and then go and prepare for the recruitment work." The figure shrank in the quilt, moved, reached out and groped on the bed a few times, then pulled the envelope and shrank back. After a while, Aokiji's dull voice came out, "Why don't you go by yourself? I have no face to see him." In a place that no one could see, there was a glint of crystal on this strong woman's face. "So, you didn't hit a killer at all." For some reason, even though the two sides were enemies, Simon still breathed a sigh of relief. In the past few days, the matter of whether Sengoku and others are dead or not has been raging, even in the small countries on the edge of the Four Seas and the Yuhi continent. Because the news was too shocking, Simon's heart was all hanging on it. At this moment, he was relieved when he heard the accurate answer given by Loya. "I'm not stupid." Loya gave Simon a funny look. "It's easy to kill them, and then do we have enough power to take over the mission of the Navy? When the pirates have no scruples, you should know better than me how many people died. It's against our purpose. In other words, if there is enough power to take over the Navy to maintain the order of the sea, will you really kill?" In this regard, Simon turned to Byakugan helplessly, expressing that he did not want to discuss such a terrifying topic. And Loya took a sip of Yuhi tea, and the warm fragrance suddenly made him feel warm. Not killing them is more beneficial. With the lesson of this time, even if those guys have opinions on me, they can't find the executor at all. All the high-level naval forces have failed. What do you think they can do against me? Instead, killing them will make them take revenge. All kinds of provocations in name. It would be bad to delay the plan at that time. Actually, if there are only one or two to deal with you still won't let them go. Robin knew Loya a little better than Simon. She sat beside Loya, holding a teacup gracefully, it is also a deterrent to the enemy. If only the three generals come, I guess Akainu and Kizaru won't survive at all. In terms of your character. Just like when he was on the empty island. This man's methods are more ruthless than anyone imagined. Hate, don't say it so thoroughly. Loya pinched his nose in a funny way, and there was a burst of laughter in the living room. Indeed, Loyake has never been a good person. When he was still an admiral in the Navy, he was known for his cruel methods and ruthless style when dealing with the enemy. And if you want people to fear you, killing a leader or two is undoubtedly the wisest thing to do. In addition, Akainu's last forced palace in the headquarters, and Kizaru's lore attack in this ambush, all made Loya not have a good impression of these two people. Naturally, he would kill them if he could. But in the end, considering the stability of the sea, he gave up this seemingly tempting idea, and changed the direction of Tianyu arrival. This tea party has exposed a lot of problems, and he has to prepare more, so the current sea must be stabilized. A warm tea party full of corpses and blood is going on, and it's the New Year's Eve, everyone wants to have a more relaxed year. But suddenly there was a knock on the door, and the person who walked in after getting the answer was Geisa, who had been in the lab all day. He was a little out of breath at the moment, and he held his breath against the door frame for a long time, and then the first sentence he said after his breath caught everyone's attention. Lo. Loya, my lord, there is movement in the box. Box. Loya suddenly remembered the Halu sarcophagus that was placed in the water more than a month ago, and immediately stood up excitedly. K. Rockdale succeeded. I don't know, we need your help to get the box up. Loya's ice is extremely hard and the temperature is extremely low. The device's ability to sense the movement of the seabed is Geisa's limit. As for bringing it up, it is estimated that no one except Loya can do it among the people present. Okay, let's go over here.